What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 14ts Chapter 261 Twins Dialogue, Big Guy, Ask for Help. Previous chapter Next chapter advertisement Hailong couldn't foresee Ran's next move, but he had already sensed danger in his subconscious. But he couldn't avoid it, he watched helplessly walking in front of him and stupidly saw the burning in the other's eyes. Even though there are many people who are very unwilling, at this moment, the boundless Asura hell is constantly swallowing up his spiritual power. Facing the loser, Ran had no idea at all, and when he looked up, he saw that the space on the second floor was slowly opening to him. Just as Ran entered the boundless Asura hell before the treacherous general, his disappearance was also silent. Group News. At present, one person has completed the assessment of the first layer of boundless Shura hell within 5 minutes. As soon as the news came out, explosive discussions started again in the chat channel. Zuan Xiao. This is simply direct crushing, no, direct penetration. Open black lens bracket Tokusaki Kuzan close black lens bracket. Does it really exist? It's amazing. Honkui, I am willing to follow such a strong person for the rest of my life. Dare I ask how the first person who eats crabs feels? Better than the Pope, the strong is the goal that I will always follow, but in 5 minutes, the O3 boundless Asura hell will be over, and I really can be called a strong man. Yingjung. I only know one such powerful person. Open black lens bracket Longkui close black lens bracket. At Winning Senior, is the person you were talking about the same as what I think? Yingjung, oh, you talk about it, maybe we guessed the same. Advertisement, Red Kui. Solanum Nigrum, I would also like to see what kind of person you think can possess such a powerful power. Long Kui, Hong Kui, I found that you were giving me another slap in the face. Open black lens bracket Tokusaki Kwangson close black lens bracket. You two are obviously twins, why are you always in a bad temper? Open black lens bracket Song Kui close black lens bracket. Senior, I think you must be familiar with the person I am talking about, and he is the only one with extraordinary meaning to you. Yingjung. Well, I can probably guess that it was a day when the two of us had an accident. Open black lens bracket Tokusaki Kuzan close black lens bracket. What kind of riddles are you two playing? Since you are talking, you can't use a more straightforward way to talk about it. Zuan Xiao. I know too. Seeing you guys like this, you must be startled to have an idea in your heart, and that powerful being is really the only one. Open black lens bracket G ran close black lens bracket. That's right, it's me. Suddenly airborne in the chat channel, the public screen of the chat channel suddenly began to be noisy again. Open black lens bracket Shizaki Kwangson close black lens bracket. Boss, please bring me, Honkui, big brother, please bring me. Zuan Xiao. Boss, please bring me, +1 a row of knee bosses swept the screen. A long ladder that could not be seen at all stretched out in front of him, and seemed to lead to a mysterious passage, but he could not detect it. When Ran stepped into another world with 1 foot, the long ladder connecting the two worlds began to fold and transform, and the magic of hooks has already twisted the objects that exist in this world. Ran suddenly became suspicious, this should not be the case in the face of his detection. Advertisement, G Ran, you are finally here, we are all waiting for you. Then it depends on whether you can face your most fatal weakness, although I'm also looking forward to the appearance of being able to ravage you on the soles of your feet, 92. Looking at the long ladder that has been slowly stretched out in front of him, it led him to gradually step into the illusion. Ran has begun to accumulate strength behind him, and he always takes every accident into consideration for sudden situations. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. There are only a few who can really analyze themselves. Ran frowned. There is no surprise or panic on the face. I am you. Suddenly, the soles of his feet were dyed to reflect an existence almost identical to him. Wouldn't the clone find a successor in this new world? The ninja world has already begun to ask, and it is only a matter of time before he wants to fundamentally solve the problem of fusion. The folded world has begun to have some mysterious illusions, and the subtlety of privacy has begun to gradually become clear. With the fluctuation of sound waves in the air, no clues can be found after the sound is twisted. In the face of such a powerful existence, they didn't know whether to pity the loser or to say that G-Ran was too strong, so much so that they began to show shadows. Ranrao is not the kind of person who can easily give up. In the boundless Asura hell on the first floor, Ran just had the strength to control the opponent, and now the existence of the second floor made him start to have some doubts. Among all the rough changes, this is the only one, which is indestructible and indestructible. The virtual battlefield can simulate the world in a 1-to-1 ratio, so the sense of reality and oppression it brings is also multiplying. The back of the long ladder turned out to be the connection port of another world. If it was connected through this layer, it would be enough to hide all the breath. Advertisement. No wonder Ran's detection lost its original ability in front of it, but its existence is to connect the population of another world. The power contained in the bloodline has begun to awaken, and a long wind is drawn behind him, blowing a strand of blue silk in his hair. He looked up at the chat announcement, and asked about his own abilities. Ran didn't notice many abnormal things, but his second level was not that simple. Ran is very calm to distinguish the source of the sound. There is nowhere to escape in such a wide and bright place. Now that he is in the realm of immortals, if he wants to improve steadily, he can only give full play to his absolute rule under the suppression of the Jedi power. In this way, the difficulty of the test of dying will be further improved by a level, and these are the contents that dying has not yet known. Just like the entity that exists in the two mirrors, it will also become a weapon for it to attack the body. This is about to begin. Who are you? It's impossible that you are me. What is your intention? In the world of mirror folding, if you want to break free from the situation, you must find the only constant in the predicament. While he was at a loss, he saw a new but unfamiliar world in the folded world. The two worlds in the second layer realm are not connected to each other, and it will take a certain amount of time to break down one by one. This kind of perceptual transformation has made Ran's heart feel at ease, and the best solution to the unknown is still to continue to challenge. The dyed Sharingan has already started to riot. Facing the repression of absolute power, temptation is the most deadly method. If you want to break the predicament, you must go all out. The illusion begins to change, and it is also looking for opportunities. The space where the mirror exists will reflect the opponent and gain the power of the opponent at the same time. Chapter 262 Clean up the unsightly things. The biggest enemy is yourself. Subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Under the strong impact of the spiritual power, if you can seize this time to carry out a dimensionality reduction attack, then the die in the mirror image is calculated in this way. It is a pity that the existence of the mirror image is powerful enough to deter, but the actual combat power will definitely not be the opponent of die. Ravaged. I want to see how I destroy your world little by little. 99. For the other person in the mirror image, there will be no emotional fluctuations at all. In his eyes, provocation is the most immature trick. At the same time, both of them are very clear that under the crushing of absolute strength, they will eventually be further sublimated. He was able to capture such an upgrade opportunity, it must have been tempered. Then let me see your full strength. The other party is also a relentless master, and the folded parts of the mirror world have all been reflected under Ran's feet. Exactly the same appearance, there are no flaws at all. The power after the comprehensive improvement is no longer bound, but has an absolute weight full of spiritual power. This is the realm of heaven. Immortal World Reincarnation Mangekyo Sharingan, the left eye pupil technique has become a fully upgraded version of Kyoka Suigetsu, and the 5 senses are controlled. The right eye pupil technique is an advanced version of the complete engraved emperor, which controls time. When the two explode at the same time, the space will be twisted to a certain extent, and when the fantasy space is severely damaged, the accompanying power will also change accordingly. Advertisement. In the irresistible immensity of eternity, then the only victor must be him. In the two-level static realm of time and space, a black shadow in the fantasy space suddenly occupied all the sight of Ran. The twisting darkness began to gradually devour everyone's rationality, and the appearance of enmity on the other side was particularly ferocious. This was the scene in his inner world that he was most reluctant to mention. Such a weak self, standing in the smoke and darkness, gradually sinks. Without a glimmer of hope, the huge dark power swallowed up his loving side, causing him to lose his most basic sanity. The various bloody scenes in the picture, Ran thought that these had begun to gradually fade from his world, but he never thought that it was hidden so deeply in the depths of his heart. Illusion didn't take these to heart at all, but was constantly stimulating and dying the psychological defense line. How could the only one who can possess the power of a new world powerhouse be defeated by such a trivial matter? I shouldn't be irritating me again with a scene like this, but it's over. 9. After the original 2-level space static field was opened, Ran has already begun to master the initiative in the illusion, and launched a series of Jedi counterattacks. The power that has penetrated deep into the heart has already begun to make progress in essence, but it is far from enough. You are so terrifying. Before waiting for the next sentence, the mirror world in front of Ran had returned to calm. Zhang Sanfeng. What you said is true. Open black lens bracket song kui close black lens bracket. Die brother, come on. Solanum Japonicum just passed the first layer. Yihei. The boss is looking for change in the midst of the same. Only he can defeat himself, and then he can be constantly reshaped. Advertisement. Open black lens bracket Aizen Kuyusuke close black lens bracket. Can I beat myself? Ridiculous? Such a dazzling existence has gradually emerged, and the spiritual power in the vast universe and even in the entire universe, if you want to become its master, many tests are inevitable. Ran has already felt the purest source of power from heaven and earth, and what was defeated in the virtual battlefield was the illusion that came from his heart, so the stronger he was, the greater the counter-repulsion power he got, but fortunately, he finally won. In the vastness, every little bit will bloom a diligent and rotten flower. Zhao Xiao, he will eventually create a new future and create a prosperous world. In the personal chat channel, Solanum Nigram's attention to dying is definitely not so simple, and there is always a power machine in dying that makes people have to be convinced. Such courage are vividly reflected in Ran's body. If you want to create a new situation, the only rules and exceptions that need to be broken are to constantly challenge yourself. Dai has mastered the rules in this world, and in order to achieve the desired height, it must be tempered. Being thrown into the furnace of tempering, if you want to save yourself, you must die and then live. As the illusion shattered, the dye that came out of it was like being reborn. The 4 shattered cracks seemed to be a powerful hilt inserted into the dyed chest, and once such consciousness appeared, it meant that the illusion had not been completely resolved. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. Chat channel. When facing the most powerful enemy in your heart, you will be able to become your own strong field. Yihei, I don't think so. After defeating invincible opponents all over the world, the only victor will be lonely, so it may be himself who defeats the strong. Aizen Huyusuke. But we have never seen anyone who can be reborn into nirvana, not to mention that under such a fantasy, life and death are beyond control, so be careful to go crazy. The last piece of fig leaf in the illusion is itself. If it wants to reach the point where the fake is confused with the real, then it must have defects from the beginning of its existence. Advertisement. The strong vibration of the dustpan caused by the seam, the power in the circle has begun to converge, and they can only hold their tails in the face of such a terrifying person. Such a majestic power is constantly filling his blood, seemingly tirelessly nourishing his internal organs. That kind of renewed power has returned. Zhang Sanfeng. After breaking the rules, how many people can fulfill themselves? Break. Being able to be active in the public eye, such a powerful strength has never been ignored. Open black lens bracket. G ran close black lens bracket. If you don't break it, you should be clear about these annoying things. Among the different opinions, everyone is very clear about the simple truth. Under the repression of absolute power, whether it is oneself or the enemy is a great test of psychological and even physical strength. Ran has not had time to recover his mental power, and the realm he occupied is beginning to collapse to the naked eye. Zhao Xiaoxiao. We have witnessed such exceptions time and time again. Group message 66. So, are you doing a nesting doll? Open black lens bracket. Shizaki Kwangson close black lens bracket. The boss is still sitting at the top and can only be looked up to, not something we can imagine. After breaking the cage that belongs to him, he is still absorbing the essence of the world, so he will definitely break through. Open black lens bracket. Yan Shou Tobarama close black lens bracket. Now a whole new world is opening up in front of us, facing the enemy in our heart, isn't that me? Open black lens bracket. Aizen Huyuja close black lens bracket. Heroes see the same thing. He is irreplaceable in the leadership and even among the wrong, Hao Zhao, who leads the ninja world in the new world. Chapter 263. Do you think it's enough to stop me? Subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The power of heaven and earth was constantly revolving in his body. When the scene of rupture appeared in the illusion, a string that was tight in Ran's heart completely collapsed. Leading the most important force in the ninja world, and asking about the cultivation rules in the small world, he took every step carefully. Ran looked around the realm, and after breaking the illusion, it began to improve rapidly. He felt the vastness of this world, and even the entire universe was constantly changing under his feet. To deal with all kinds of changes with the same, has always been the most calm first person. Group announcement. In the face of the second level challenge, a person with the ability to successfully break the upper limit of the realm was born, and his reward is pure yuan of heaven and earth. In the fantasy world, it is possible to catch tens of thousands of difficult offensives between groups, and blind defense and offense can only consume power on the spot. At the same time, it is equivalent to wasting energy. Simulated as the weakest part in the heart, or the dark part, it will attack the body in multiples. While being able to resist everything, a new force will surely be established. Some of the remaining evil forces in the body have been completely disintegrated, and facing the past inwardly makes him walk down a stage without hesitation. No matter what the situation may be, he will keep going. Shizaki Kwangson. Heaven and earth pure yuan, what is this? Zuan Xiaoxiao. Your attention has never been on the idea, haven't you seen the level above? Advertisement. Whitebeard. It's really terrifying. When people reach a certain stage, they have to admit that promotion is no longer as smooth as it used to be. Open black lens bracket. Winning policy close black lens bracket. Being able to possess such a powerful coercion is by no means a fish in a pond. Honkui. Now that you know this is wishful thinking, it might be better to be realistic and practice hard. Yingzheng. How can I have you anywhere, and this can become wishful thinking? Just follow the boss. This king thinks that you are just sitting there watching the sky. Whitebeard. The power of the pure essence of heaven and earth is derived from the essence of nature, but no one has ever been able to absorb it so easily. If you become a tempered body, then this person's cultivation speed will be more than 5 times that of an ordinary person. Long Kui. It's so terrifying. A DBF's cultivation speed surpasses that of ordinary people, so how powerful he must be. The power of the pure essence of heaven and earth has been completely absorbed. If you can come into contact with a more advanced world, Ran feels that this trip is worthwhile. After aware of the strange feeling that exists in the space, the pure power of heaven and earth that Ran absorbed directly broke the sense of boundary. Such profound memories also make Ran's memories a little confusing, and in the face of the interspersed sense of time, it has already begun to feel a little out of balance. When such a relative impact of extreme power appeared, Ran had already lost his expectations. Ran, I won't let you do what you want, and what you want, I will destroy it. The additional blow strength of the virtual battlefield is by no means simple. Without experiencing the tempering of the pure power of heaven and earth, his physical strength can only be sustained, but his physique is too special. Sounds without a trace could be his nerves starting to tense up. So, do you think you can live with me like this? You underestimate me too? Advertisement. Compared with the strength of the first 2 layers, from the spiritual force to the Jedi counterattack, the real face of the 3rd layer slowly unfolded in front of his eyes. The angel-like face has a strong sense of existence, but the darkness contained in it is constantly swallowing her heart. Open black lens bracket. Shizaki Kwangson close black lens bracket. According to your realm, you must be able to do whatever you want. The voices in my mind are still echoing, constantly challenging the bottom line of dying. Listed are all the opponents he has challenged, and the scene in front of him is too real to let Rand take a breath. This feeling of directly breaking the barrier made the aura around him become colder. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. Deeper and deeper power. It seems that there are countless things below that are fighting to break through the barriers and come to him. The power of the pupil technique increases the sensitivity of his 5 senses to the world. As the tempering time prolongs, he continues to internalize, and then the power of Sharingan's existence is gradually increasing. The canopy of destruction is where everyone lives, and here there is no pain, no death, and no hierarchy, so stay and you'll get what you want. Open black lens bracket Tokusaki Kwangsan close black lens bracket. Benefactor, what state are you in now? I guess the one who passed the second floor is you. The steady stream of natural power will become his reliance, just like the vast sea of power will continue to replenish the part he consumes. The enclosed power cannot return to his body, and it is most likely due to the limitation of the space domain, which has caused his 5 senses to lose their effectiveness. Open black lens bracket Shizaki Kwangsan close black lens bracket. Alara, it is my benefactor. Advertisement. In the face of a world where the strong are like forests, the movement of such a bloody storm cannot be shaken at all, but the world he leads will eventually reach the highest point. Jiran, take your life. A harmless hook like Changongchi was now in front of his eyes. The burning in his eyes and the coldness with which he successfully resolved the conflict between Changgong Dao and Tokozaki Kuzan was simply a hook card from a mold. In the chat channel, 3 lines of information suddenly popped up and sent to Rand through the personal window. The lively scene flashed in front of the die, and it seemed that there was something that could not be captured at all. Among the 5 senses, he is now completely closed, relying on his own innate intuition to perceive changes in the world. With everyone's expectations, Rand has embarked on an adventure on the 3rd floor. The distance that spans 1 step is also an unbridgeable gulf. Under absolute pressure and even strength, all illusory myriad things are clouds of smoke. The superposition of the 3rd layer cannot be underestimated. With the advantage of his reincarnation Mangekyo, Rand has overcome his weightlessness in the sense of space. At the same time, the infinite sinking feeling that space brought him has gradually subsided, but he also tried to change his physical senses, but found that it was pointless to do so. It seems that at the same time as the fusion of the small world, the incidental forces have begun to change his body structure. If you can resist the source of power, and then find a solution, then you will inevitably find the last manipulator. It seems that his body has recovered to its peak, and in the continuous tempering, he seems to be able to feel the infinite amplification from the senses. At this moment, Rand's heart has already had some waves, and he is still a little aware of Tokosaki Kurumi, but now this situation can't help but remind him of Chong Gong Ling's face. Chapter 264 Xiao Huohuo's Friend Application, The Ugly State of Chong Gong Ling. Please subscribe. Previous chapter Next chapter advertisement. When the 2 absolute forces collided with each other, they detonated the way that Rand was concerned about. The participants in the virtual battlefield can feel the huge impact this time, and the unmeasurable losses are expanding step by step. Originally, his consciousness had become clear and clear, but it was naturally impossible for Rand to sink when faced with such a provocation. Rand looked at the gradually expanding battlefield in front of him, and could almost smell the smoke of gunpowder. At this moment, the chat channel was bombarded with many people because of this sound, and the group has begun to become full of enthusiasm. Open black lens bracket Tokusaki Kuzan close black lens bracket. What is the situation? How can such an abnormality occur in the virtual battlefield? Zuan Xiaoxiao. It seems that these 2 absolute forces collided, but I'm not sure. Are there more powerful characters in the virtual battlefield? Whitebeard. To be able to produce this kind of impact, their existence itself has become another source of detonation, and this kind of strength is absolutely rare. Winning policy. I am in the 2nd stage of the virtual battlefield, but it is rare to be able to attract everyone's attention. Open black lens bracket Aizen Huyusuke close black lens bracket. The independent existence as the source of detonation has already surpassed our strength. Open black lens bracket Yihei close black lens bracket. It's not impossible to know who this mysterious person is. With such a powerful force, it is worthy of us and you to look up to. Better than the Pope, look up. Indeed, the world that belongs to the strong has always been the place everyone looks up to, and only the strong can stand on the top of the world. Zhang Sanfeng. It's strange. In the past few days, there has never been a shortage of people who can create miracles. Just wait, I will be able to pass the 2nd level assessment immediately. Yihei, that's not fake at all. The 2nd level assessment is really perverted. It's just torture to death for your life. Open black lens bracket white beard close black lens bracket. Young people should be less irritable and more peaceful. Fang Lian can pass smoothly. Zuan Xiaoxiao. It seems that everyone is doing well. They have already entered the 2nd floor, and it is time to pass sooner or later. Advertisement, Honkui. Sorry, I have already passed the 2nd floor, trying to reach the 3rd floor. Honkui's strength was conceived from Solanum Nigram's avatar, and Tillian seized such a good opportunity. Otherwise the 2 of them might not be able to fight each other now. Open black lens bracket Song Kui close black lens bracket. I'm going to the 3rd floor. I really want to know which floor Brother Rand is on. Zuan Xiaoxiao. He must have passed the 2nd floor long ago. It seems that everyone is very concerned about Rand's situation, so that under the crushing of this absolute force, shadows have gradually begun to appear. The opposite of dying is not a person at the moment, but a number of people far exceeding this. There was a huge mass of people's heads, and it seemed that there was no edge at all. As a dyer who has been fighting for a long time, his heart has become very restless at this moment, and while facing this situation, he also needs to deal with the rhythm of various unexpected situations. No matter what kind of attack the enemy is, Ran must ensure that his mind is absolutely clear. So, you're trying to overwhelm me with characters, instead of you having the strength to meet me head-on? Ran's words had become extremely cold, and he did not take these little tricks of the other party into his eyes at all. With the absolute advantage of the number of people, this kind of repression has been unable to jump in front of him. Coercion Octopus Collapse. If you can suppress the enemy within the attack range, then the attack that can directly defeat the opponent is a high destructive attack. How could you do this? In Rand's chat channel, a friend request suddenly appeared. Also, it should be him who will ask this question. But he knows me, Jian, could it be a parallel world? Advertisement speculation flashed in his eyes. Although he has not been in close contact with the person who sent the message, Ran has already made some guesses. In the face of Xiao Huohuo's application, he didn't expect to be diligent. After all, there are only a few people who can see the coercion of the absolute domain of the enhanced version of Bahibeng. And Yao Lao's existence is a secret. So, where is Yao Lao? He has been dormant for a long time, and I have never seen him. The sky is parallel to the universe. Xiao Huohuo's eyes are lonely. Compared with Ran, they are after all a master-disciple match, but there is real emotion in it. Therefore, in the dyed heart, it began to relax, and the creativity in the face of this new world has gradually begun to reverse. And Dai decided to get in touch. Maybe Xiao Huohuo and Xiao Huohuo will meet in the future? So, you want to get Yao Lao's whereabouts from me? 99 Ran raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiao Huohuo. He was not very surprised by this situation. 0. Ask for flowers. Yao Lao's existence is also one of the few existences in the small world, facing this uncontrollable cause. Su Xiao's fire has also become the most exceptional factor. Almost. That's it. 9 The Zhanchong ruler behind Xiao Huohuo is also an exception, a good thing left by Yao Lao to this guy. Ran looked at the figure that had disappeared in front of him, and he saw a specific shadow in the midst of darkness, but after reaching out and touching it, it became more and more subtle. Advertisement. Then, you need to join this Jinbang chat group first, and then I have the task of police. I will find a solution for you about Yao Lao. 99. Ran has gradually begun to change the direction of his attack. He can't relax in the face of hidden opponents, especially in the face of this situation. He cherishes his feathers more. Make a deal. Xiao Huohuo had already joined the chat group. Facing these relatively unfamiliar existences, he gradually became a little uneasy in his heart. At this time, the power of the reincarnation eye coercion and the 8 extreme collapse was enough to suppress most of Xiao's successive heads, and the power of dying and the absolute suppression had begun to become more specific. As the smoke went out, they all began to become transparent, and the last one hidden in the hook had been revealed. It's really you. Chong Dongling's eyes were full of venom, like a lion majesty quenched with poison. But when Ran saw Chagong, he already had a scruple in his heart, and it would be a good incision for a character like a defeated general. So now it's too late for you to admit defeat. Chong Dongmin's current state is like walking with corpses, with only fighting in his eyes. Ran is also seizing this opportunity. If he can cause heavy damage to Chong Dongminato, then he will be much easier in the future. Losing? There's never been such a word in my dictionary. With 4 hands, facing a stubborn existence like Chong Dongminato, she must completely destroy her spiritual world. The heavy blow that landed on Chagong's body was as bright as a star, and was completely enveloped by a large airtight net on top of Chagong Ling's head. Heaven and earth, if you want to escape, it depends on whether she has the strength. Ah, I will never let you go. The expression on Chong Dongling's face has gradually become twisted, and such an angel's face is actually such an ugly person. Chapter 265 Invitation to join the group, the ultimate temptation of the only flower. Subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The appearance of Chong Gong's hoarse roar fell to the bottom of his eyes and looked ugly. In his frowning eyes, there was a kind of light that looked like a pitiful worm. Chagong Ling, she ended up in such a situation. It is completely the result of her own fault. It's really noisy. If you can directly break the absolute advantage in adversity, then the rest will no longer be a threat at all. Immediately after Ran broke through the 3rd layer, all the scenes changed, and he was able to possess the power that belonged to the strongest person in this world. The source of uncontrollable power began to rise and fall. Although the virtual battlefield has been constantly escalating the difficulty, Ran did not feel that there was any upgrade change. Under the shock of absolute power, all difficulties will surely turn into nothingness. Ran found that the improvement of his own small world relies on absorbing the power in the essence of heaven and earth, and he will make a breakthrough under an opportunity in the stage of filling. 337. If he is facing a bottleneck, what he needs is an external boost. And these are the cultivation methods of ordinary people, and they are not enough for him. Being able to have an enhanced version of all the skills that belong to the ninja, after such enhancement, all the powers will have an incidental improvement. And Ran's ability to cultivate will be improved faster than others. Following the guidance of pure yuan power between heaven and earth, Ran has now mastered the promotion rules that belong to this world. He still has a long way to go before he wants to stand at the top, but every step he has to take is exceptionally solid. Group announcement. Now half of the staff have passed the second floor, and they have been rewarded after passing the level assessment, and now some people have passed the third floor and began to challenge the fourth floor. One thing to note. The virtual battlefield has a total of on the 9th floor. Among the 10,000 years, there are very few people who can stand above the top position, but at the same time, it is no longer a problem to be able to obtain benefits. The group chat, which had been silent before, began to boil again. Although it was just a conversation between one or two people, it had already begun to warm up in the group. Advertisement. Xiao Huohuo. Hello, I'm Xiao Huohuo. Zhao Xiao Xiao, welcome newcomer at all members. Even though it was in this situation, everyone didn't have a big reaction, not even a small splash. This kind of indifference made Xiao Huohuo feel embarrassed for a while, but Xiao Xiao soon realized that this Xiao Huohuo was most likely the one pushed by Ji Ran. Just like people liked Obarama or Orochimaru and Maru. Big guy, a lot of points is self-willed, but if Ran knew what Zhuan Xiao Xiao thought, he would be very speechless. He did go to one sky world, but that was the anime world, because Queen Medusa has two. And now this, mostly from the world of fiction. At least it won't be a TV series about Dukiwama. Zhuan Xiao Xiao. Don't feel embarrassed, everyone is preparing for their own battles on the virtual battlefield, and everyone gets along very well. You can ask anything in the group directly. Open black lens bracket Dokasaki Kwansen close black lens bracket. Alara, you can come to us with anything. Open black lens bracket Dokasaki Kwansen close black lens bracket. Friends, which floor are you all on? I have stepped into the third floor now. Open black lens bracket Solanum Nigrum close black lens bracket. The third floor, Zhang Sanfeng. Me too. On the third floor, I must be surprised that the progress is now comparable. Whitebeard. Exactly. Open black lens bracket Dai. Welcome at Xiao Huo Huo advertisement. Dai suddenly hooked. This made everyone's eyes change slightly. There were only 2 administrators in the group, and there was no group owner, so Dashong usually spoke freely. But at the moment Ran has been diving for a long time, and now welcoming a newcomer is enough to see that this newcomer is not simple. After all, Ran was the first among them to reach the level of Heavenly Immortal, and any of them felt incredible. Being able to have such a promotion ability, and at the same time absolute wrist suppression and even tough strength, so everything began to be traced. Many of them can get together because of Ji Ran's matchmaking. Open black lens bracket Dokasaki Kuzan close black lens bracket. What's the situation, the benefactor who has been diving for so long? Open black lens bracket Longkui close black lens bracket. Brother Ran, you are finally online. Open black lens bracket Xiao Huohuo close black lens bracket. Thank you. Although there were only a few words between them, it was enough to see Ji Ran's status in this chat group. Being able to have powerful strength and also have such a group of powerful teammates, Xiao Huohuo is very curious about what Dai will do next. If there is any fluctuation in dying, then continue to challenge the next level. They all know the role of the virtual battlefield, and the power to absolutely counterattack will naturally possess fatal things, and it is this kind of existence that makes them attach great importance. There are only 2 paths in front of Ran, one seems to lead to a dark forest, and the other is a flowing river. Often in 2 places that are very different, there will be treasures in heaven and earth, and there is no doubt that Ran will choose the big forest. Where there is no daylight, there is a place where darkness can reach, and it is such a place that can cultivate the ultimate temptation. Advertisement. The purpose of this dying trip is very clear, he wants to get the only flower that is extremely tempting. Legend has it that such a single flower grows on the cliffs and is hidden in the depths of the bottomless forest. There will always be all kinds of strange existences in the deep and uninhabited land, and all the plants under the shadow of the big forest begin to stretch their original postures. The only flower. He walked through the big forest without hesitation, following a trail that was clearly visible in the forest, but the path was not so smooth. Soon it came to the end of sight, not because there was no road, but at the end of the road there were already white bones. Such a terrifying scene has not extinguished the determination to find the only flower, for which he is bound to get it. Follow me. Such a familiar voice sounded behind Ran, and in the face of such a familiar voice, Ran naturally relaxed his defenses. Looking at Xiao Huohuo who was on the road ahead, 1.5 Ran gradually disappeared in the bottomless forest. The spreading green has begun to turn into a great wall in front of them, hindering their progress. Xiao Huohuo walked into the depths of the forest almost as if he was familiar with the road. After all, the power he possesses belongs to the essence of heaven and earth, and belongs to the same vein. On the contrary, Xiao Huohuo's small body can be safe and sound, which is beyond his expectations, but in the next second, a rhythm that looks like an only flower appears on the cliff. Ran's eyes were too surprised to hide, but the lines on Xiao Huohuo's Zon heavy ruler seemed to be gradually deepening. What is the reason for such a change? Before he had time to investigate, Xiao Huohuo had already walked to the edge of the cliff, and Ran had not yet been able to stop it. This situation was like the ultimate temptation. Chapter 266 Wonders of the World, Flowers and Leaves Will Never Meet. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Being able to have such an abnormal thing naturally attracts Rai's attention. But his powerful restraint ability will never enter into this kind of temptation. Xiao Huohuo is also to wake up Yao Lao to be so anxious. Therefore, he will definitely help to dye it at this time, and the color of the pattern of the Zon Chong ruler becomes darker and darker, as if it was nourished by being immersed in the blood. This terrifying thought floated in Ran's mind, but in the next second, Xiao Huahuo's whole person began to become a little weird. Xiao Huahuo. Looking at the appearance that has begun to lose spirit in front of him, Ran's heart began to become a little uneasy, and was soon stared at by Xiao Huahuo. Those eyes have gradually been filled with blood, and it is impossible to distinguish right from wrong in this world. The existence of the only flower is a great temptation, which can turn the most desired things into reality in people's hearts. Once caught in it, they will be tempted. It's an out-of-spec oddity. Unless it is extremely powerful self-control, it will enter the moment of brain chaos. 03 It is extremely dangerous when the only flower is picked. After all, if such a proud thing is uprooted, the strange thing itself will not be peaceful. And once it comes into contact with a living creature, the ultimate seductive power of the only flower has been beaten back to its peak, and all the living creatures begin to attack the sober person. Therefore, the white bones they saw at the beginning were not so difficult to explain, so the temptation of the only flower was almost impossible to resist. But everyone is not clear. Although the existence of the only flower is extremely shocking, there is simply too much difference between the flower and the leaf, like the sky and the ground. Comparatively speaking, dying is more inclined to the latter. Advertisement. The flowers and leaves of the solitary flower do not bloom on the same day, but after the flowers bloom in the silence of the night. No one can explain how these two miraculous phenomena have become so harmonious on the same plant. The leaves of the only flower can detoxify hundreds of poisons, and can also enhance the body's physique. Such an effect is the most suitable existence for dying. In the face of Xiao Huahuo, who was seduced by the only flower, Ran didn't have any extra turbulence in his heart, but he didn't understand why this Zan Chongqi was so strange. Xiao Huahuo's whole body seemed to be oppressed by this Zanchong ruler, but Zanchong ruler did not seem to have a fatal impact on Xiao Huahuo. Come to ask for it. After Zan Chongqi suddenly broke away from Xiao Huahuo's body, Ran was waving the Zan Chongqi in his hand. This is still a little difficult for ordinary people to control, after all, it is master, but in his hands it is just a plaything, far less than the red sunflower sword. The material of this Zan heavy ruler is special, and it is beyond specification. 66. It's no wonder that Xiao Huahuo is all around the world and can still be used after sacrifice. Quote. Subconsciously testing it out, Zan Chongqi's power was swayed by Ran's hands like a pound. Although this kind of mysterious heavy ruler is cumbersome, it has endless devouring power. Ran is to use this wave of swallowing power to relieve Xiao Huahuo's symptoms, such as today's color is not all black. Under the lure of the only flower, Xiao Huahuo will inevitably encounter various unexpected situations, and Ranrao doesn't want this newly found love to disappear like this. Xiao Huahuo in the novel emphasizes love and righteousness, and has clear grievances. Advertisement. It is a man who can be cultivated. Zan Chongqi, you are going to devour Xiao Huahuo's will now, and wait for his consciousness to be completely rescued by me before taking back the power. Immediately, a milky white breath began to spread along the handle of the Zanchong ruler, which seemed to be a trace of Yao Lao's remnant on the Zanchong ruler. But for Xiao Huahuo, it was more than enough to last until the night. The color of the only flower gradually began to become splendid. This confusing color made Ran frown. The animals hidden in the forest seemed to have their senses infinitely amplified at this moment, and this seductive atmosphere began to spread gradually. So, are you still excited? Ran looked at the only flower with 3 petals blooming on the edge of the cliff. This kind of tempting aura had begun to spread around him, and he had to keep it here. The only flower is too cunning, and it will use various powers to constantly repel those who want to take it away. The heart is absolutely pure and cannot be driven. Dying. There were all kinds of teeth-grinding sounds around, and even the roar of beasts. Ran was not moved at all. If he wants to break through this realm one by one, Ran still needs enough patience. The power of all kinds of roars has gradually approached the sound of dying. The existence of the only flower is to prove that beauty is also a fatal danger. In all kinds of situations where there are many phenomena, the die did not bring him to the situation of death. Therefore, when the roars of these beasts were constantly approaching, he was ready to fight back. Ran's surroundings have been stared at by all kinds of green eyes, and it seems that if he does anything unusual, he will immediately bite Ran's throat. Advertisement. This kind of beast with a tingling scalp will be very troublesome in real battle. Therefore, Ran will have a tough battle to fight. According to the law of the jungle, there must be a head that can lead all the beasts. Then when Ran starts to fight, all kinds of roaring sounds start to grow louder. Staring in one direction in his brows began, that kind of beast that still had a lucid consciousness in his eyes but was not attacked. Their existence is the only place that the only flower is ignored, but the only flower has already bloomed 2 petals one after another in the waiting time, and the only flower that has all bloomed. The aroma of the only flower suddenly became dense in the air, and once the aroma of 340 was inhaled, it would surely be captured in the inner soul. But at the same time, after the only flower has fully bloomed, it is already close to night, and there must be a battle of points at this point in time. The tensed Dai looked at the beast, staring at him with shining green eyes, wanting to eat him. Ow! All kinds of beasts have been hooked from the dark, and this swift and violent power has greatly impacted the various senses of Dai. The sharp movements and the quickness given him by the sensory upgrades made Ran become more and more comfortable. With a group of beasts lying in a pool of blood, the sense of urgency to be stared at around Ran has gradually diminished, and the great forest ushered in its dark hour. The whole body of the Dai was surrounded by the smell of blood, and the smell of blood directly impacted the most primitive impulses of the beasts, but this absolute suppression also made them not dare to go forward to offend easily. The only flower on the edge of the cliff has converged, and the leaves are constantly stretching its shape. The flower and the leaf are corresponding, so the only flower has a total of 5 leaves. Ran picked one of the leaves and put it in Xiao Huahuo's mouth. At the same time, Ran also took Xiao's remaining 4 leaves. Naturally, he had to take advantage of this rare opportunity. You can stop devouring it until he wakes up. 17. Ran has already started to adjust his own breathing with his legs crossed. With the rhythm between breaths and breaths, the inside of Ran's body is constantly churning. Chapter 267. Overlapping space now, subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Under the milky white hazy smoke, Xiao Huahuo's entire body returned to the cage with his will, and his sight gradually became clearer. In front of him, he had already started to meditate, and his eyebrows and eyes were somewhat gloomy. The 2 special powers of the only flower are constantly resisting in his body at this time. There is a huge difference in medicinal properties between flowers and leaves, and if he wants to fully absorb it, he must endure it. Ran absorbed the unique effects of the only flower in an awake state, but at this moment his face was soaked with sweat unknowingly. The feeling of the 2 layers of ice and fire continued to attack the edge of his weak will, and at the same time he had to constantly maintain his sobriety. Xiao Huahuo's eyes were deeply inquiring. Although Ji Ran in front of him was indeed very powerful, Yi would never take the opportunity to rob him under such circumstances. Xiao Huahuo had not heard Yao Lao mention something as dangerous as the only flower, but now his physique has indeed become more refined. Due to the presence of Zhan Chongqi, his fighting spirit was further suppressed, but at the same time his potential explosive power was stronger than others. When Xiao Huahuo looked at Ji Ran, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. Such a physique was much better than his youthful talent. Dai guides the rampant power in the body, injects his natural power into the 2 powers, and must possess a strong repressive force in order to subdue the unique effect of the only flower. After the transformation of natural forces in his body, he began to gradually transform the 2 contradictions in his body. A warmth suddenly rose from the white dantian, and this gentle power seemed to be helping him to continuously refine his physique. Advertisement. At the same time, the pure energy of heaven and earth is pouring into his dantian continuously, and the mutual fusion between the 2 is unusually harmonious. At this moment, Ran Chong breathed a sigh of relief. After all, using his own strength to refine medicinal properties was a great test of his spiritual strength. There is a slight problem in one of the links, and he will not be so smooth. While waiting for Ji Ran to wake up, Xiao Ran had already started cleaning the beasts around them. Often the smell of blood is most acute in the deep forest where the sun cannot be seen, and all kinds of hidden beasts will hunt according to this smell. So he knew very well that either they were hunters or they were food for the beasts. Thanks. Xiao Huahuo heard Ji Ran's voice before he could see Ji Ran, who had finished his cultivation. You're welcome, I'm doing it for myself too. Originally, I didn't intend to look at the specific situation through my head, but it seemed that something started to change qualitatively in Ji Ran's body. Soon in this darkness, Ran was the first to discover something was wrong. They had already passed by here once, and now this is the second time they passed by. The feeling of being immersed in it made Ran gradually become flustered, and everything began to get out of the order of the master in his hands. Unless the power that cannot be perceived is separated by space, the Sharingan according to the Dai has long been able to sense all right abnormality in space. The more powerful the existence is, the more attractive he is, and the things that can make him interested must be the core of this forest. The darkness is constantly swallowing his reason, but at this moment Xiao Huahuo is no longer taking away his mental power. Advertisement. Although Ran walked in front, after all 5 senses were released, the sense of space also became extremely sensitive, and he could naturally perceive Xiao Huahuo's true thoughts. Okay. Waiting for the first time to light up, Ran was enveloped in the light by the dazzling light in front of him. What's more, in the virtual battlefield, how can there be a life-threatening situation? Quiet in the dark, different from the usual quiet voices in the forest, this quiet voice can destroy inner peace. The sense of touch flowed through all parts of his body like an electric current, and suddenly the scene in front of him had begun to change, and he had disappeared into the darkness before he could realize what power the space used to exist. There is no trace of emotion, but the power of the only flower has indeed changed the tempering degree of his physique, and it is precisely because of this that he can continue to break through this bottleneck. You pay attention to the security officer. No, Xiao Huahuo, you are standing here, I'm checking to see if there is any overlapping space around. The depths of the forest have gradually begun to become dark, and it is completely different from the situation we saw before. This side is more like a hell that no human or animal dares to approach. Ran raised his foot and continued to walk in the depths of the forest. There must be something waiting for him in the depths of the dark forest. Following a seemingly inconspicuous path, Ran took every step firmly, and his divine sense had begun to guide him. Ran's figure has turned into a black shadow in the night, gradually hiding in the darkness. He has no interest at all in rewarding him now, and he will move forward step by step in the promotion, and he will always lead to the future he wants. Advertisement. The world that belongs to the strong spreads out in his world little by little. When Yao Lao existed, he hoped that he could become himself, and he continued to move forward with a strong man. Soon Ran heard a strange voice again, the kind of whisper in a quiet environment, with a sound of prayer that made Ran begin to doubt. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. In the thin power of virtual space, although Xiao Huahuo didn't know how this space was formed, he clearly realized that if he wanted to become stronger, he would have to put in more effort. Ran can clearly feel that the power of nature is constantly roaming in the body, and this nourishing power begins to feed back, which has already surprised him. Dai's decisive appearance fell in Xiao Huahuo's eyes, and the starlight in his eyes was instantly lit up. He felt that he had cut off the connection with another world, and his senses were enlarged in the space he was in at this moment. Originally, Xiao Huahuo still had a lot of questions he wanted to ask, but now he can only keep silent in this environment. He was completely focused on Ran's back, and it seemed that nothing could overwhelm him. You've been promoted again. Naturally, what he saw in Ji Ran was not only hard work, but an overly dazzling talent. This familiar feeling even surprised Xiao Huahuo, and he soon understood. At night, the power deep in the forest was waking up little by little, and seeing these things in the surrounding environment did not pose a great threat. There must be overlapping spaces on this side, otherwise this kind of blindfolding would not be able to escape his eyes. Follow me. Chapter 268 Ice and Fire, The Test of Two Worlds. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The sense of oppression brought by the overlapping space has also begun to increase, and the light falling on him has begun to become scattered. The feeling of the gap in this kind of power makes Ran feel at ease, and it is already clear that once the darkness begins, he will hide with the overlapping space. So he must seize this opportunity, and he has no sense of security in this forest. Then let me see, there is a hidden space outside, is there any treasure? As he began to step into the light that belonged to this world was gradually scattered around his side. Come here, young man. This old voice was beyond his expectations. How could such a voice reverberate in the depths of the big forest? After all, the depths of the forest are places where danger gathers. Few people can come to this place, and the scenery in the midst of all difficulties is reappearing like watching flowers on a horse. Ran didn't respond, but the scene that had gradually started to become clear in front of his eyes surprised him. The two eyes of ice and fire. This kind of power is actually hidden in the area where the ice and fire are intertwined, and the effect is the same as that of the only flower. This made Ran curious, but in the area in the deep forest, there seems to be no trace of anyone coming here. 340 is indeed the case. If you can get the ice and fire herbs, then this space will become your appendage. An old voice echoed in Ran's ears. The first time he didn't notice where it came from, but the second time he heard the source of the voice very clearly. An ancient tree of 10,000 years seems to have begun to become full of aura and has formed its consciousness. It is good. Advertisement. Ran didn't take this place to heart at all. He had already scanned the surroundings and planted plants that gave spiritual energy here, many of which were Ganoderma lucidum, medicinal herbs and even poisonous weeds. Naturally, he would not let go of such a wealth of resources. Young man, don't underestimate the power of the ice and fire eyes. If that's the case, try it. Under the shadow of the ancient trees of 10,000 years, there is a grass of ice and fire, and it is very unrealistic to walk from the surrounding to the spring. There are all kinds of deadly poisonous weeds around the spring. And from the top of the 10,000 years ancient tree, he can see the entire condition of the two eyes of ice and fire, and at the height of his depths, he has already felt the coldness and enthusiasm that belong to this spring. One side is roasting, the other side is ice and snow. This kind of extreme existence can also make these plants start to undergo great changes. No wonder. Ran has browsed all the situation, and now he has no way to directly enter the eyes of the two instruments of ice and fire, but the intersection of the two is exactly the position he can choose. If he can enter from here, then the pressure on him will be weakened by half. But soon Ran was able to realize that no matter where he was in the eyes of ice and fire, he could not escape the two feelings of burning and freezing. PFF'd. The surrounding area of the Dai has begun to be wrapped by the frozen power, and the biting cold swept over every inch of his skin. The depths of the spring's eyes turned out to be icy cold, and under the impact of such cognition, Ran had begun to realize his mistake, and he also began to panic when this situation appeared. In the next second, the biting cold instantly turned into a roasting temperature, and the roasting in the desert made him feel dehydrated. With the fairy realm, Ran never thought that she would have such an experience. The strange feeling is still Yingru. Advertisement. The shock that belonged to the ice and fire two instruments grass can no longer be described. He has tried to return to his own little world and found that it can be done easily. Then consider it a training exercise. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. Ran insisted on continuing to dive, because the ice and fire 2-meter grass in the two eyes of the ice and fire sank at the junction, and if he wanted to obtain this grass, he must continue to dive under the constant torture of the two forces. The ice and fire 2 instruments grass underwent a sudden change in his body, and he soon became aware of the condition of his body. The blood vessels of the skin have begun to become transparent, and he began to calmly face the power in his feet. The absorption process of the ice and fire herbs was not as smooth as he imagined. Young people, don't be too confident. At least this chat group virtual battlefield hasn't planned to mess with things, and his retreat is still there. Ran realized that due to the effects of the ice and fire eyes, which were subtly changing his body strength, the blood vessels that were originally congested had begun to become transparent, and these twisted blood vessels actually began to become more tense. I will not give up. It's the first time in so many years. It seemed that Ran could still hear the sigh of the ancient 10,000 years tree. Faced with this sinking power, Ran's body center of gravity had become no longer heavy, but moved restlessly along the impact of the two forces. Ran continued to be immersed in darkness. Following the movement of his body, he was immersed in darkness, and he could no longer perceive the vastness of power. From the extreme cold to the scorching hot summer, Ran felt that his body seemed to begin to develop another kind of resistance. Under the offensive of the two powers of ice and fire, it is fundamentally indistinguishable, not to mention that at the beginning of his awakening, he began to realize that after all the power is carried, his body strength cannot meet the requirements and will be dormant. Advertisement. The power of the only flower has begun to gradually exert its power, and under a little neutralization, Ran has begun to have a chance to breathe. The two have been constantly letting his will begin to escape, and in the depths of the spring, he has felt the ruthlessness that belongs to the two eyes of ice and fire. Underwater visibility has begun to be difficult, and Ran can feel that his breathing is oppressed, and this strong feeling makes him very uncomfortable. Ran's heart has now become alive, and the effect of the ice and fire herbs is like remaking him. This shocking power is far more powerful than the power brought to him by the only flower. The depth of the dive is still deepening, and with the increase of the depth, Ran begins to realize the warmth of the ice and fire. Immortals naturally have wonders that immortals cannot resist. But along with the pressure on his lungs, he was overwhelmed. When the ice and fire herbs were taken, his consciousness had already begun to dissipate. With the last touch of consciousness, he swallowed the ice and fire herbs. Mortals have nature that mortals cannot resist. Is this the end? I'm not reconciled. But thinking of the three tribulations of wind, fire and thunder, he felt that he was superficial. The five senses are completely closed. He himself did not know how long this situation would last, as the depth of the dive increased. Spiritual consciousness and spiritual sense are also exercised. This gave him a sigh of relief. He tried to open his eyes to see the situation around him, but the next second his body started a strong offensive, and ice and fire really did not mix at all. ADBF, the dyed eyes have begun to turn red, the blood vessels in the whole body have begun to become turbulent, and the appearance of blood vessels full of blood has begun to challenge his physical limits. I don't know how long later, Hongyu was awakened, and there was a flash of blood in Ran's opened eyes. Chapter 269 The Power of Awakening is Overwhelming. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. In the body of the dye, there is already a steady stream of heat surging, and the unbearable source of the vastness has begun to ripple. The ancient tree of 10,000 years has seen the changes in the dyed body, and has begun to recognize the young man in front of him. Congratulations, I have waited for so many years, and you are the first to do it. Such an old tearful voice formed a sharp contrast with the arrogance and disdain at the beginning, and it was a spark generated by the collision of the two forces. Ran adjusted his breathing, and following the guidance of the ancient 10,000 years tree, he has entered the space, and the space belonging to the two eyes of ice and fire has become his accessory. Group announcement. Ran successfully passed the 4th floor and obtained the two eyes of ice and fire. The time for the virtual battlefield has passed half. I hope you can achieve good results in the next battle. Yingzheng, what a pervert. Open black lens bracket Tokasaki Quanson close black lens bracket. Is this the absolute crush of strength? Whitebeard, this kid is indeed my favorite. Open black lens bracket Longkui close black lens bracket. Brother Ran is already so powerful, I want it too. I also hope to be able to become the person who is side by side with Brother Ran one day. Tokasaki Quanson, I should touch art here, die. Xiao Huahuo, at Ran is too powerful. Open black lens bracket Yihei close black lens bracket. Sao, are really good at it. Advertisement. Better than the Pope, the world that belongs to the strong will always be at the top. Aizen Huyusuk, this is the absolute crushing without bottom line. Haihara this wave of operations is so simple, it's simply inhuman. Zhang Sanfeng, it turns out that the strong are by our side, constantly breaking through but never being surpassed. In the lively chat, the whole screen was filled with the power of Ran. Faced with this kind of offensive, everyone began to realize that Ran had broken through their cognition. From envy to skyrocketing, Ran brought them too much shock. The dye, which had disappeared in front of Xiao Huahuo for a long time, suddenly stood in front of him and shocked him. The dyed eyes were still somewhat hot, but they were quickly suppressed by the strong will in his heart. Are you okay? Xiao Huahuo looked at Ran's Fang Shong with concern, and an irresistible force suddenly made his heart quiet. There was a faint smell of gunpowder smoke hidden in the imperceptible air, and now the dye standing in front of Xiao Huahuo returned to normal. I'm fine. Didn't you say you want to find your master? I have a solution. Ran has just harvested the power in the eyes of ice and fire, and Ran has already found the spiritual power to restore Yao Lao. This is Bing Ling grass. Its effect is to restore the mental power of heavy injuries. It must be able to help you recover from old age. 9. The power in the eyes of Bingwo Liangyi has been taken into Xiao Huahuo's hands, and the little bit of light that bloomed in his eyes was covered by Bing Ling grass. Xiao Huahuo was stunned by the light in front of him, and Xiao Huahuo couldn't imagine that the dye would be given to him directly. Advertisement. Will this affect you? He was still hesitant to look at Ran, but Ran directly shoved the Bingling grass into Xiao Huahuo's hand. Thank you. The originally quiet scene in the big forest has begun to change gradually, and around Ran, he has begun to adapt to the battle in this virtual battlefield. Regardless of the situation, Ran's ascension speed has begun to soar like a rocket. Ran clearly realized that under the impact of the two forces, he was more able to master the aura surging in his body. The vastness of the great forest had disappeared from his vision, and the next fifth floor had begun to guide his test. The power of awakening is already overwhelming. The breadth of the hook around the die has begun to gradually become more magnificent, and the aura seems to be higher than the initial realm. In the 11th order fairy realm, Ran can more clearly realize that all power needs to be fought for on a down-to-earth basis. Once he breaks through the constraints of Shao's absolute power, he is the unstoppable powerhouse. Following the guidance between heaven and earth, the spiritual energy accumulated in the Dantian began to gradually fill up. Facing the power of the entire level, his physique has begun to rise to another level under the tempering of the eyes of ice and fire. The success of body quenching allowed him to directly understand the secret of the master's awakening of power, constantly breaking through his own limits and then being able to truly fight back. 0. Ask for flowers. After Ran came to the 5th floor, the scene in front of him was like a maze. No matter how you look at it, it is a kind of environment, and you can't see the slightest diligence at all. Advertisement. The more brain-burning it is, the more common ground is found between the two. After Ran stepped into the labyrinth, a pair of eyes in the darkness began to change with his figure. The vivid scene didn't make Ran feel abrupt at all, but in the labyrinth, Ran began to find that his discernment ability had lost a large part. The identification of the location can allow him to walk smoothly. It seems that the other party does not have this intention, but has murderous intentions in the dark. Every crisis that was about to move was gradually magnified in the 5 senses of dying, and the mood of panic has enveloped his inner world. 0. He didn't notice that his power was undergoing a further transformation. The effect of the ice and fire eyes on him was definitely not as simple as changing his physique. It is not an exaggeration to say that the two extreme powers are opposing resistances, but a greater part of the reason for being able to live peacefully in Ran's body is that he possesses a part of the power of pure essence of heaven and earth in his body. This kind of moisturizing power is constantly neutralizing the fierceness between the two. The milky white aura enveloped the dyed Dantian, and the warm forehead aura enveloped his limbs and bones again. In the labyrinth, there is no way to hinder Ran's action, so Ran can maintain absolute sobriety and calmness. The gentle power of Dantian is still expanding the scope of influence, making Ran feel the vastness of the origin of this world. Ran was shocked. At this time, he always felt the huge influence from this world on him, which fundamentally made him realize the vastness of the original world and his insignificance. A voice sounded in his heart. If you want to become a strong person, you must wake up completely. Are you ready? I'm ready. It seemed that he was surrounded by a beam of light in the serious dyed eyes like an oath, and the awakening power began to surge in his body. The turbulent victory scroll began to spread to his limbs in his Dantian, and finally he tasted the vast power like a broken bamboo. Human. Chapter 270 in the Labyrinth, the Net of Heaven and Earth for subscription. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The eyes in the labyrinth suddenly became confused. What happened to Ran's body? The awakening of this kind of power shocked them greatly, and the aura that was once threatening has now begun to churn like a cloud of smoke. That vast power has completely made them forget their original purpose. The power hidden in the labyrinth is definitely not only him. According to such a vast situation caused by dying, the people who waited for the rabbit must have been uneasy long ago. None of them would have imagined that a character who looked like an immortal would have such a powerful source of power. The power of the pure essence of heaven and earth is constantly being refined in his body, and his powerful body is constantly changing like a furnace. This time it can finally be stopped. Ran silently felt the changes in his body since 340s, swallowing up the essence power in the heaven and earth does not make him feel that it is difficult to directly transform, but it is smoother than before. Based on the original foundation, the ice and fire two instruments grass made his body strong enough again, so he had enough time to face the next challenge. He was no longer worried about the dangers hidden in the maze, but he couldn't help but feel a little worried when he looked ahead. If you want to escape from it, you must find a person who guards this formation. Every position will have this guardian, and it must be difficult to defeat them one by one. Although he has been promoted to the 12th level, he must go all out to an enemy 2 levels higher than him. After each level is divided, it begins to become strict. If you want to face this kind of low-level challenge, you must start with the strongest. Advertisement. The direction of the instantaneous movement in the labyrinth began to change again, and Ran knew that his current position was no longer the same as the one he entered. Instead, it changes according to the strength of each position, and in terms of position, he can almost distinguish between police and rhyme. Do you think that you can lift me up like this? It's a bit too underestimating. Ran's entire energy has begun to be used to identify police positions in other ways, and he has lost his greatest advantage in the battle. After awakening, he can perceive the power of nature, regardless of the scattered arrangement. But after entering the formation, the maze is just a cover-up on the formation. If he wants to get in touch with the most core part, only he knows that breaking love is his only way to rhyme. The corners of May's mouth rose from time to time. He was the first to come into contact with Dai, but he knew very well that Dai was not easy to mess with. As for the sound and position identification, Ran soon realized that this maze was superimposing a skill every time it changed to 1.5. Changes are made every last quarter of an hour, and the position of the positions will also change with the changes in the formation. Listening to the die in the labyrinth, I can't help but feel more suspicious. A low smile rippled around Rand's mouth, but it was quickly put away. The inner world of the sugar charm sprites has begun to become quite unsettled, and it is decidedly not that simple to make them live. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. Advertisement. Kong he looked at each other, and the originally majestic rain turned into hail in an instant. This kind of force that fell from the sky seemed to want to penetrate the protective layer of the die. A touch of danger flashed in the eyes of the four of them. For this kind of cultivator who can identify the position by listening to the sound, the four of them must do the most rigorous transformation. In the hearts of all of them, they no longer underestimate the die, but go all out to treat this character standing in the labyrinth. At this moment, the eyes of the die are clear and bright. The power in the mist and rain was originally relatively small, and it soon became a torrential rain, which poured down smoothly. The aura emanating from Rand's body has begun to gradually become cold, and it seems that he wants to get rid of the factors that caused him trouble. The spatial sound transmission of sugar in the darkness has already begun. No one can know the true strength of the other party, and it is impossible to realize the depth of it. Soon Rand walked to an inconspicuous place, and after standing still, he began to ponder constantly, with an inexplicable smile on his face. Therefore, when faced with a powerful opponent, they would always avoid confrontation with each other, and instead watch the opponent with a cold eye as the last touch of breath disappears in the footsteps. Now he looked at the mist in the mist and rain, and seemed to put a protective coat on the big formation. In the face of the power of the strong, he had to pay more attention, and the position where the die stopped was exactly the indeterminate point for the next transformation. The changes in every corner were kept in his mind, and his steps became firmer from the chaos at the beginning along the changes of the labyrinth. Therefore, their time must be completed in a hurry, not to mention the ability of the other party cannot be underestimated. Orientation is still difficult for Rand to identify, but listening to sound can give him the most accurate direction, so he began to become extremely sharp. Soon the sprites changed their control positions, and such a battle without gunpowder officially started. Advertisement. Do you think this kid is just bluffing? Okay, everyone is on their own, guard your own position. There will always be a formation eye in each formation. One is to facilitate the overall understanding of the formation, and the other is to resist sudden situations. In the next second, they realized that Rand had begun to walk away slowly, as if these misty rains and hailstorms were simply scratching their heads. Ji and Shai didn't answer the words, and the position they both stood by was the most important part of the entire maze. But the thing that is haunted in the minds of other people is how the power of the pure essence of heaven and earth can enter the body so easily. Every cultivator's physique has an upper limit of tempering, and this guy doesn't seem to have it at all. Such concerns. Although Rand's ability to listen to and identify positions is not very strong, it is enough to make them feel a little scared. But when faced with dying, those who guarded their positions began to feel a different situation than before. After all, if you want to achieve victory in a big battle, you must guard every position in every position. Every time the big formation runs, there will always be a corner left behind, so this place is a successor that will never let the other party know about it. It seems that you are starting to change formations. Stunned, let the four of them fully realize the absolute strength of Rand. There seems to be an invisible wall around Rand, blocking the changes of the scene in the labyrinth, and he has become the only exception in the labyrinth. He Tang's position as a support in the maze also broke into a cold sweat, so they wouldn't get much benefit from this person's hands directly. Chapter 271 Crushing, Inhumane. Subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The visible transformation of the moving speed in the maze is far beyond the scope of dying. Presumably he has already played a sufficient deterrent effect on the opponent, even so his heart has begun to gradually calm down. The only fixed number in the midst of all changes, the only point of the 10,000 rough changes is the fixed value. There is no longer a threat to exist around Rand, and when he starts to use his own strength to support the giants in this world, these enemies will no longer be a threat. You can end it. Even in such a complicated labyrinth, Ron has begun to think about where he can escape. In the face of foot conditions, he will not resign, but take the initiative to attack. After accurately deducing the direction of the next evolution, Rand's eyes had a resolute look. Every position was determined through careful deduction. To infer the enemy's position through the law of evolution, Rand did waste some effort. The swift and violent storm in his mind instantly ignited all his passion. His face was as usual, but his most ruthless scene leaked out in his eyes. 03 The location of the monster is fast enough, but the ability to die is simply inhuman. No matter how they cover up the existence of the formation, he can find it accurately. So that their situation is very passive now. If they have been led by the nose like this, then they will definitely lose. The sprites looked at each other, and they knew it in their hearts. Advertisement. The only way to face this kind of situation is to have a strong enough deterrent to the soul, and the power of the ghost is enough to resist all the power in the dark. From Rand's body, they see the natural power that belongs to heaven and earth, and they must make some sacrifices if they want to win from it. Tang Mei, the two of you start to work, and then I will urge the fleeting formation. Although Chi Mei looked at the order, they felt that they were not in a desperate situation in the current situation. Once the fleeting formation is activated, it is extremely dangerous. Do we have to do this? The four of them tacitly glanced at each other's position, and then left a sigh. When Rand stood in the eye, he was confused by Tang Mei and the two of them, and even when the two launched an offensive, a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. If he guessed correctly, two of the four had already appeared, so the remaining two were secretly plotting some unexpected situation. Once the dyed Sharingan was turned on, a sound suddenly echoed in his head. Almost made him fall into endless chaos, and soon he realized that this formation had begun to transform, not the simple formation from the beginning. Ah, so you planned everything in advance, are you ready to meet me? Immediately, the maze in the formation began to crack inch by inch, and there was no beautiful place to be seen at all. Would you like to come with me? There was no stern look in his eyes, he raised his head to look at the four of them, and was quietly exploring the power of this world. The four of them looked sideways, it was impossible not to be surprised when they saw Bingwo Liangyi's eyes, and they began to speed up in an instant. Advertisement. Since dying has mastered the strength of tempering the body, it has become very easy to introduce the power of nature. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. The place where the world's rare and precious herbs can be gathered is actually the big guy in front of him. Simply inhumane, to say the least. There was no emotion at all when looking at the four of them. If he didn't have the slightest chance, then he would probably fall into desolation. After watching the formation, the four of them have all stood above the formation's eyes. If this move fails, they will usher in doom. Ice and fire eyes. 9. Finally, when they want to continue arguing, Ran has found that the structure of this world is collapsing in -340 steps. The momentary formation after the hijacking of the sky made Ran feel the darkness of this virtual battlefield, and it was completely hitting his bottom line. When Ran began to open up space to them, he couldn't help but feel a sigh of relief. Zhu is the most knowledgeable among the four of them, and he is also beginning to be surprised. The power of nature is transformed so easily, and the other's body is completely like an inexhaustible container. Therefore, when the world collapsed, the last string in their hearts was also broken, and Ran walked towards them step by step, as if coming from a radiant and warm country. The power between the master and the master has been balanced, the power lost has been reduced, and the power of the accumulated machine is gradually increasing. The four of them seemed to be bewildered by his voice, and they couldn't help nodding their heads. A burst of roaring sound entered their ears, and the power that had begun to fill up around Ran's body continued to expand its influence. This feeling made his state not much better, but there was a hint of worry in his eyebrows. Advertisement. Ran stood in the light at this moment, like the god of hope that rescued them. There is no blood on the faces of the four of them. Sugar charm sprites exist in the darkness of the world, and they have never enjoyed the warmth that belongs to this world. Break. After the burst of the fleeting formation, Ran always felt that there was a problem. The faces of the four of them suddenly turned darker. How could this heaven-defying power come about? It is good. The formation that the four of you just sowed is going to kill me, isn't it? As the guardians of the fourth floor, we have to do this. Such an evil formation is absorbing his power continuously, and the milky white hazy feeling rhymes around him again, resisting the attraction of darkness. At the beginning of the establishment of the fleeting array, it was a disillusioned existence, so they all began to guess whether their fate would be miserable. Ran used his body to feel the dangers that belonged to this world, and the formation seemed to be constantly extracting the power from his body as if it was full of vitality. When the enchantment around Tang Mei Yulang had already arrived, cracks appeared, and the airtight light made them have nowhere to escape. The four people who were standing tremblingly in their eyes were completely unable to believe the scene in front of them, and Ran walked through the smoke and walked in front of the four of them. More and more power is beginning to accumulate in his body, but the lost power is also trying to divide this power. Such warm forehead strength made the four of him feel a shudder. After all, they just wanted to put Ran to death. The death that belongs to the spiritual realm will also announce that the traces of his existence have been erased little by little. Chapter 272 Break the Fourth Floor, The Ancient Golden Dragon. Subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Now Sugar Charm can't wait to supply dye, such a big guy has already achieved such excellent results. It is simply an absolute crush on these mediocre people, but it is not too late for them to surrender now. When Ran looked along the space crack, the world at this level had completely collapsed, and there was no way to keep it as it was. However, there is still a power that attracts his attention, and he can feel the different energy in this world. There is no way for him to cut off the connection with this world, after all, he has not completed the final task. The voice in that head gradually became blurred, and Ran fell into the initial state. When Ran woke up, there was a golden dragon on the sign opposite him at some point, and the appearance of showing his teeth and claws was quite realistic. At this moment, the voice deep in his heart became clear, and it seemed that there was a powerful soul force in the golden dragon's body. Such a vivid appearance cannot really touch the most real part of this world, but obtains in dialogue opportunities from his consciousness. I am the ancient golden dragon. Young man, your powerful strength has broken through the limitations of this world, just awakening my soul. At this moment I want to give you a revelation. Ran raised his head and glanced at it. Every inch of such a lively golden dragon was glittering with golden light, and the aura was compelling. You say. The power of the ancient golden dragon directly penetrated his body, and the weak and powerless outline gradually became clear in Ran's mind. When Ran saw the ray of light pass through his body, he realized that something suddenly burst open. The continuous power has begun to surge, and the inside of the dyed body has undergone great changes. Advertisement. The place where the spiritual power of the whole body gathered has gradually become more abundant, and the light body and his spiritual realm are also constantly rising. There is this inner elixir within my body. If you can take it away, it will be considered as fulfilling my wind wishes since the past 10,000 years. 99. The golden dragon on the upper shell got too much power, and Ran had already begun to hesitate. It is very difficult to quickly absorb his physical strength, and his body began to agitate under the guidance of the spiritual energy. There seemed to be a psychedelic aura still floating in the air, and soon his consciousness became blurred again. This kind of power that is not under his control has become flustered, and the power that cannot be adapted continues to skyrocket in his body. There are naturally many rare treasures in the virtual battlefield, but few people can take them away with such exaggeration. Ran is the unique exception, and naturally he chose to be in the same situation to calm his own thoughts slowly. Every place where power exists will be his breakthrough, and if he can find the original entrance from it, he can also leave this place smoothly. This very unreal feeling gradually swept his mind, and the collapse of the world was accompanied by the disintegration of the fourth layer of power. The existence of the ancient golden dragon made Ran clearly realize that his current level simply cannot support him to the end. If he chooses to continue to absorb at this critical moment, then the next situation will continue to exceed his expectations. So, young man, you've made a choice, haven't you? In a trance, Zongran once again saw the appearance of the ancient golden dragon on the plate, and soon his heart gradually calmed down, so this illusion would be silent again. He will never interfere too much with things outside his ability, and he must now get out of this place. Advertisement. The dazzling light fell on his body again, but such a warm power actually made him feel a little cold. It seems that the power in the air begins to change suddenly, all the noisy things begin to stand still with time, and he is still wandering in this space. He began to hate the mystery that the labyrinth gave him that he could never figure out, and he couldn't feel the passage of time now. The power that can control the stillness of time and even space is definitely not the power that he can control. Rand's heart was quite restless, and following the only constant base point in the ruptured space gave him the motivation to escape. So, here is the mouth to lie down. Rand raised his eyebrows to look at a dark place, and an inconspicuous position in the space was exposed in front of him. A golden light suddenly radiated, and the intense light made his eyes start to sting. All 5 senses and even all abilities have been restored, and he looked at the remaining figure in the desolate world behind him. The phantom of the ancient golden dragon was also destroyed, but Rand did not notice a deep imprint on his body. Group notice. Congratulations, since you have successfully passed the 4 levels, the other friends should continue to work hard. The time for the virtual battlefield to open has become a countdown, and there are 2 days left. Everyone needs to hurry up and complete the tasks that need to be challenged. After this news was hooked, the originally silent news group boiled again. In the face of the blow of the strong, each of them has a fireworks in their hearts, and it suddenly burst into flames. A raging fire that belonged to cultivation burned like a prairie, leaving a deep imprint on the bottom of each of their eyes. Advertisement. Tokusaki Kwangsan dying, it's so powerful, it's like the sky for all of us. Zhu and Xiaoxiao, there are still 2 days left to leave the virtual battlefield. I don't know what Dazuo thinks. Whitebeard, G. Ran, this kid, is doing big things on the internet, making each of us a raging fire in our hearts. Yingzheng, he is always the #1 person who deserves it, and follows him to find the secret key to longevity. Yihei, I also want to be a character minister who stands at the top like him, alright. Zhang Sanfeng, this is what a truly powerful person should be. Haihara, I am so envious of such a talented person. I also want to be as powerful as him. Open black lens bracket Song Kui close black lens bracket. Brother Dai, he has started to become more powerful. Xiao, Solanum Nirvana will continue to work hard. Open black lens bracket Song Kui close black lens bracket. Be sure to follow in the footsteps of Brother Ran. Better than the Pope, the world of the truly strong is opening, and the power after awakening will conquer the entire universe again. Ran has begun to prepare to enter the next level, and the time left for him has gradually become less and less. If he wants to complete the challenge of the 9th floor in 2 days, he is under a lot of pressure. If he wants to stand on the top of the world, all his efforts are counted. Such a hot thought has gradually made him feel the heat in his chest, and he must be the most dazzling existence in the forest of strong men in the future. Chapter 273 Time Rift, Fearless and Fearless, please subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Like a dusty memory, Rand stood on the opposite side of the 5th floor and his heart has calmed down. A cavity of blood, challenge again. There was no sense of experience at all, and when Rand entered this world, he did not discover the laws of this world at all. The speech and even the dress of everyone here are very different from him, and there is no common ground at all. Just when he started to have doubts, he saw a plaque in a small place at the entrance of the village. There were only a few words on the square plaque, such vigorous words fell into his eyes with a special kindness. This is his original world, and his original appearance in the forest of the strong is so weak, it seems that there is no power in his hands that can compete with other people. But it was also in this place that he took a crucial step from his own world. The dazzling feeling in the bright and extinguishing made him a little uncomfortable, and soon his eyes followed the boy in front of him and continued to move forward. The young man looked at the fireworks that had gradually cooled down in front of him with joy. The bright fireworks were his rare warmth. Traveling freely in this world, he soon found that no one could see his 340 existence here. Like an illusory shadow looking at his growth trajectory, planning his own future little by little. When the light began to witness the growth of a little boy, it was still a little hard to accept. Advertisement. Because he knew very well that the little boy in the past was so carefree, but when a devastating disaster struck, he was powerless to fight back. Looking at the weakness and incompetence at that time, he had browsed all the things that were dusty in the depths of his heart when he moved forward with the passage of time. Like a dazzling butterfly that flies into his dream, Rand feels his own transparency in a blink of an eye, and his body has begun to become lighter. A strange rising feeling swept through all his senses again. Rand didn't know where he was, and could only find the entrance to this world according to his instinct. Finally, a straight road appeared in front of him, and no one lay there at all. He stood alone on the wide street, and the space with no one around him began to become noisy. The hustle and bustle of the crowd just walked by ADBF from the opposite road regardless, and went straight to reveal his body. The fading emotion began to stir in his inner world, and the restless soul and the scene in front of him made it difficult for him to let go. After the time and space stopped, Rand had noticed that he had begun to enter a deadly cycle. Whenever he thought time was starting to pass, he could also feel the world playing out over and over again in front of him. That uncontrollable force made him more impatient, and the time left for him had begun to gradually run out. To stand at the top of the pyramid, he would have to pay a lot. When he was young, he once again appeared in front of him, and now the boy's eyebrows were full of uneasy expressions. With such a cowardly appearance, Rand could empathize with him, and this primitive impulse made him unavoidably touched. You have to be strong, and you have to know that your efforts can change a lot of things. What you can't do now will be realized one day. The sound of die seemed to be integrated into the wind, and it began to drift everywhere with the wind. Advertisement. The cycle continues, and the die that falls in it has gone through the trouble 3 times. Being in it, but not being able to touch any one of them, there is no hope at all with his eyes. Like a lake, his inner world began to rise gradually, and a piece of ice melted in his youth. The color of the dyed complexion has gradually darkened, and he was illuminated in the time rift. The power of this cycle made him lose his fighting spirit. The originally seemingly bland time just rolled through every part of his heart like this, hot and hot again and again, and Rand decided to start a Jedi counterattack. After the awakening of his power, Sharingan brought him not only ability, but also a disaster. The two made him hesitant and naturally passive. At this moment, Rand has become strong enough, his strength and will have been recovered, and the power to fight against the time gap is being torn apart a little bit. In time, after he fell into an endless cycle, the whole person has become weak. The increasingly transparent color has already drifted into the distance, and now his power is awakening and waiting for an opportunity. In the process of accumulating explosive power step by step, Rand finally realized that he was also waiting for redemption when he was a teenager. The secret of time is the biggest hidden danger of his youth, and this cycle of power makes him daunted. Fearless and fearless. The gleaming light in the young man's eyes was becoming firmer by little, and Rand began to fight back against the huge threat posed by the time rift with all his strength. The small appearance has begun to become brave, and the dyed body has gradually become warm. Advertisement. When the two of them touched, Rand felt the hot temperature of his fingertips and seemed to set him on fire. I know you told me to be brave or not afraid. Rand thought that he could only observe his growth trajectory as an outsider, but he didn't expect that he would continue to achieve his childhood self. The little ray of light projected by the hook in the space-time rift completely tore the 2 spaces of the rift. The boy and Rand already understood the silent communication in each other's eyes. The power of this power is the light that time gave him. At that moment, Rand seemed to understand himself when he was a child, and began to choose to forget the past that was unbearable for him, and gradually turned into a cloud of smoke that dissipated with the past. What exactly are you testing me over and over again? I already know, so let's not waste time. A radiant little girl stood opposite Rand, and she looked in the direction of Rand with a graceful posture, and her eyes had some feelings that Rand couldn't see clearly. Before he could investigate further, he saw that the little girl had begun to move away from him step by step. That sense of loss also filled all his senses instantly, but after the moment of clarity, Rand felt a little sane. Time is really an invisible blade, cutting the power that belongs to this time. Goodbye, late, so I choose to forgive you this time. 93. Rand's heart began to sigh, and the disappearing figure of this little girl was imprinted in the depths of his mind. Time will be so powerful that all memories become extremely clear. Even such memories disappeared when he grew up, but the figure of this little girl made him feel hurt for a while. Chapter 274 The Hidden Heart, so that he can't get the water spirit beads. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Rand's memories began to gradually become clearer, but he still had that kind of weird feeling in his heart. The remaining 6 and 7 floors have been completed within a day, and Rand can't help but feel a little dazed looking at the countdown sign. Although each level of the virtual battlefield has different levels, this time he truly felt the power of various fields. When the wings are not yet full, try to avoid the positive light. The shredded light of the youth, the profound back of the little girl, and a dazzling memory just dissipated in the wind. After rising to the 6th floor, Ran began to become fierce, and basically he was preparing for a quick battle. This speed was unmatched by other people. The strength of his body forging has become an extravagant hope, and it is impossible to measure what is involved in the two. In the calm mirror image, Ran began to see the little man in his eyes, the little guy who was chasing victory. Reincarnation Mangekyo's existence, the impact on the emotional brain will no longer be dangerous, and will become the warm presence in his heart. Call. Ran stepped into the 8th floor experience without hesitation. He knew very well that when he stood at the top, he was the only one who sewed. The fast-moving spiritual power in the body is constantly exchanged, and this gradually becomes a normal state. The abundance of power in the body makes Ran feel that it is not difficult to cultivate. Advertisement. The top of the head has begun to transform into various colors, and the sun shines in the seawater and gradually refracts various colors, making the eyes suddenly become colorful. All the seawater pressure in the underwater world does not exist on him, and he feels the vastness of the sea as he drifts along the ocean currents. That kind of tolerant power made every pore of his body open, and when he looked over there were a few fishes wandering around. The bottom of the sea is also silent, and every inch of his skin is enriched by a little bit of silent power. The more he dived, the more he could see the richness of seabed resources. The area rich in sea creatures shows that the spiritual energy here is absolutely rich, and Ran didn't guess wrong. Unbearable joy filled his heart, and when he dived next, he saw an even more surprising scene. The distribution of these resources belonging to the world is often fair, and the silence of the underwater world and the quietness of the forest are the gifts of nature. Ran felt the power after diving. All the ocean currents no longer became gentle, but some lingjo rubbed his skin. The giant shark surrounded Ran's body, and the inverted triangle eyes looked at Ran with malicious intent, and they all looked at each other. Those sharks are carnivorous by nature, so they are endowed with a ferocious side. Looking at the front of him without changing his face, the giant shark has a very close distance with him, and even the fins of the giant shark just brushed past his body. The feeling of the rest of his life made him feel the danger of the sea for the first time, a marine world belonging to carnivores. The light of the Shui Lingju seemed to have lit up in front of his eyes, and the twinkling brightness surprised him. When Ran saw the Shui Lingju, it must be false to say that he was not surprised, but he found that the Shui Lingju was embedded in the deepest part of the seabed, and once it was taken away, the creatures on the seabed would lose their balance. But he had no regrets at all, and even had expectations for the 9th level. Advertisement. The feeling of powerlessness started from the soles of his feet, and the suction of the vortex had already removed a large part of the dai's strength. The existence of the Shui Lingju is directly related to his victory. He needs to obtain the power of the Shui Lingju to open the 9th floor. Now he is completely relying on his physical strength to resist the whirlpool. At this time, his struggle in the whirlpool is extremely dangerous. This non-attacking creature, Ran will not take it to heart and continue to choose to dive. Ran quickly left this sea area, and he was hesitant after all when obtaining the key to open the door or destroying an underwater world. When Ran withdrew his hand, the seabed would inevitably riot, and the vortex on the seabed was swallowing up the river bed little by little, regardless of what kind of change it was. But he introduced the power of nature, and the power containing the element of water continued to guide him. A mermaid hook was now behind him, as if her eyes could see the depths of his soul. Ran's situation began to become more dangerous, and he who was originally passive became more passive. The bulging eyes were looking directly into his eyes, and the feeling of powerlessness attacked his sanity again. Now he may not be able to get the Shui Lingju, although it is such a close distance, he can't start. But it soon became clear to him that in the depths of the ocean were the most dangerous places in the ocean. A mermaid was floated at sea. Her eyes were so charming that she even looked at the painting with a touch of devotion. Who are you? Why did you break into the forbidden area? Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. However, he found that he was trapped in the vortex of lottery, and a deep sense of powerlessness completely swept him. Advertisement. The creatures in the entire underwater world began to become violent, and the seawater became more bloody, and even many creatures were killed. By the time his entire body was on the sea, the ocean had begun to become uneasy, and the changes in the wind and rain also alarmed Ran. Ran began to hesitate, and was completely shaken by the strength assessment of the 9th floor. When his hand touched the water spirit bead, the vast power belonging to the sea was repairing his wound little by little. The sharp sandstone seemed to have cut through his skin, and the bloody smell of blood spread in the sea water. After all, the sun is at the level of the sea, a little bit at the same level as the sea, like a person who is very lit by the sea. 0. Ask for flowers. The 5 senses have been closed, and he cannot perceive his true feelings. The undercurrent is turbulent, and it is impossible to see the flow of each river at all. After the crisis of signing the vortex has been resolved, he began to search for the water spirit bead on the seabed. The Junhai treasure that belongs to the seabed is not so easy to find. Therefore, when he was still hesitating, the mermaid had already swam to his front. Connecting to the realm below through this world, then he needs more than that. With the power of the ocean and the blessing of his original natural power, the depth of the dive has begun to exceed his original expectations. After waiting for them to leave, Ran accelerated the diving depth, and he knew very well that he wanted to get the source power of this seabed. The depth of the vortex made Ran feel a little tricky, and the deep suction made him have difficulty breathing. But after the sinking feeling suddenly disappeared, Ran began to escape in a different way. Chapter 275 Virtual Battlefield closes, Absolute Dictatorship. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The dyed eyes did not contain any excess emotions, and the mermaid began to become more vivid in the sparkling waves. The sudden rise of emotion made Ran realize what the important connotation was, and the majesty of the underwater world was completely beyond imagination. With the disappearance of the dye, the underwater world gradually tends to be quiet. As if such a thrilling thing had never happened before, Ran had already begun to step on the final level of the assessment. Group news. There are 12 hours left in the countdown. After 12 hours, the virtual battlefield will be closed. Please balance your time. There is only one person who has reached the final level of challenge in the virtual battlefield. Being the only existence among all people, Jiran's existence is to prove that everything has a corresponding Tianwagang. It is undeniable that he does possess absolute strength to challenge. 343 can reach the 9th floor. He must have an extraordinary place. Zhu and Xiaoxiao, 12 hours are left, and this battle is simply thrilling. Open black lens bracket Tokasaki Kwangsun close black lens bracket. The strong are always placed in high places to look up to. Open black lens bracket Long Kui close black lens bracket. It must be Brother Ran. He has been leading the way all the way, so he must be the first person to reach the 9th level. Open black lens bracket Yihei close black lens bracket. I also acquiesce in my heart that only a pervert like Jiran can stand there. Advertisement. White beard, it's really terrifying for future generations, such young people will have a big world in the future. Better than the Pope, absolute power is the most powerful weapon to suppress all disgusting voices, and you can become a strong person after you become yourself. Zhang Sanfeng, presumably at my peak, I would not choose to confront him directly, but avoid direct contact with him. Open black lens bracket Tony Starr close black lens bracket. We are all waiting for such an excellent leader. Aizen Huyusuk, no one is more powerful than his talent. Thinking about it, this is also Jiran's absolute strength, which simply crushes us people into scum at the bottom. Haihara I, it turns out that the world of the strong can attract everyone's attention, and I am also very moved by such a bright light. Open black lens bracket winning policy close black lens bracket. Under the shroud of powerful power, Jiran's awakening is even brighter. Everyone's eyes began to become hotter, when the forces in the vast universe were constantly confronting and becoming turbulent. Immediately, the warm emotions were rendered, and the time of the virtual battlefield was passing bit by bit. The eternity-spanning time has begun to become more magnificent, and the uncontrollable universe is gradually expanding in their eyes. Looking at the last step left, the pain in his mind as if being torn apart was magnified infinitely. Ran looked at Fang Lu at the top step by step, and the originally easy steps in the steps became extremely difficult. The golden light shrouded his side, but it was no longer soft but cold. He looked up at the highest steps, and with the passage of time, he didn't have any more rounds. The world belonging to Jiran is advancing step by step. He is the absolute force at the forefront of the world, so he is the only one in the constant development and change. Advertisement. Among the strange things, he saw the desolation and prosperity that belonged to this world, but what shocked him even more was that the rules of the world began to become chaotic. There was no order at all, but he knew that power without standing at the top could not deter anyone. The pressure will increase exponentially every time he advances, but his body is strong enough to withstand a double blow. Faced with the absolute repression of this force, Ran began to realize that only by standing in that high position could he relax. The natural power that belongs to heaven and earth is being compressed in the continuous vastness, and together with his powerful physique, it is about to reach the limit of bearing. When Ran looks at the world, he wants to change the whole world through his own power, even in any aspect, but he also recognizes the cruelty of this world. Ran has already walked halfway, his face is no longer relaxed, but there is a hint of hesitation in his eyebrows. Absolute leadership love is the core strength of the world of Master, the secret of the universe hidden in Jiran. Ran felt the strong resistance, and he couldn't see a trace of panic in his steps, but he was under heavy pressure inside his body. At the end of the 26th order, his body had begun to become strange, and the strong tearing of the external force made him feel pain. In the trance, he saw a lot of phantoms that flashed by, but his strength, which has been quiet for many years, has been completely worn down by Zheng Xiao, and it is very difficult to restore it in place. In front of Ran, the assessment of the 9th level has been opened, and the dazzling golden light has covered his body. That kind of heart-breaking feeling has completely controlled his body, and he can't make any movements at all. Every flight of steps began to suffocate him, and the intense pain completely engulfed all his senses. Suddenly, his body has reached the top of pain, and the corners of his dyed mouth have begun to overflow with bright red blood. Advertisement. Only by becoming stronger can he create his own empire. The power shrouded in it has become clearer, and the light in the dyed eyes that has been caught in the beach is covered by Haohan in front of him. Step by step, he walked into the golden light, but he felt a powerful deterrent force. No matter how he chooses to exist, he must adhere to the absolute deterrent force. Randu soon realized that his consciousness was gradually becoming slack, and it seemed that the penetrating power in the air had begun to sweep all his strength. It seems that the bloody smell in the air is constantly spreading, and Ran feels the cruelty and ruthlessness of this space, simply relying on her strong willpower to survive. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. In a trance, his footsteps have become slow, but he has not stopped. He dragged his last breath, even his last strength, to the 50th step. Each of them clearly realizes that he must have absolute dominance to be at the forefront of the world. Resisting the discomfort, Ran continued to climb the steps. He stretched out his hand to erase his last stubbornness, and fell into a coma. There are 50 steps in total, and each step is enough to feel the suppression belonging to the outside world. Relying on his strong physique, he has reached the 25th step, and half of the steps were beaten down by him. Although this golden light exudes grandeur, Ran has realized that there is a very strong deterrent in this golden light. Chapter 276, A Test, The City of Slaughter. Please subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After the slumber, the world that belongs to him began to become dark and could not see a trace of light. In the airtight space, Ran could not detect danger, but his consciousness could not converge to a single point. That kind of mixed Haohan has been gradually dispersed, and it is precisely because of the impact of this power that he began to try to keep him awake. The smell of blood gradually spread in the space, but Ran couldn't feel any pain when looking at the skin that had been cut open in his hands. Incomparable to the pain of climbing the 50th step, the power immersed in darkness is approaching step by step like his inner world. He saw an extraordinarily crazy world, with no order at all, full of killing. The smell of blood began to become strong, and the dark place began to turn into an endless hell of the wicked. Roars, screams, blood flowing. All kinds of noisy sounds swallowed up Ran's entire consciousness. At this moment, his eyes turned blood red, and he looked like a cruel killer at all. The unsuppressed killing emotion kept popping up in his mind, and it began to gradually erode his last line of defense as if it were attractive. Ran's hands could no longer see what was warm, and the vivid color was impacting his sanity. Wandering on the brink of collapse, the killing continues. The constant cries made his heart feel numb. The emotion that could bring him pleasure gradually dominated his mind, and he became a sharp blade in the killing city. The knife saw blood. The ferocious light also became cold in his blood-colored eyes, and he couldn't see the light at all. Advertisement. Dying is wrapped in red, and that boundless hell begins with killing and must end with killing. A bottomless pile of dead people piled under his feet. It is impossible to see the clarity of Ran at the moment. Consciousness and mind have left the original direction, and are walking into the abyss step by step. Welcome to the killing city, and here will be your new starting point. That worm-like voice kept shouting in his mind, trying to control everything he had. Ran looked at the fortress piled up with bones in front of him, and the bottomless pool of blood had spread to the walls of the castle. That tingling feeling made Ran start to wake up suddenly, and the two consciousnesses were constantly torn apart. When the aura of killing here began to become strong, Ran clearly felt the change in the world. The power that belongs to him is collapsing, and he doesn't know which link is the problem. Don't waste your energy. If you want to come to this slaughtering city, almost no one can escape the hook, so stay and listen to the most sincere voice in your heart. The smell of blood kept pouring into his nostrils, and the consciousness in his mind suddenly began to tear strongly again, but this time, Master soon took the initiative. The city of slaughter simply cannot tolerate people who break the rules, and Ran is the only exception. Swinging the wine glass in his hand, the bright red color made his hand extremely pale. The place where there is no light at all is full of killing, and the boundless darkness here devours everyone's mind. Below the platform are the bones of the defeated, which have accumulated to become the rich nourishment of this castle. Constantly someone started to get anxious, even killing in their eyes just to please. That broad power was expanding. Advertisement. City of Slaughter. Challenge on the challenge arena, and defeat 100 people in succession will give you a chance to be reborn, and in the last difficult time, only a few people have walked out, but after they left no one's whereabouts, no one knows where they went. His eyes are already looking at the challenge on the arena. The ruthless character who has already won the challenge of the 98th person is not afraid of any death at all. Ran is waiting for an opportunity that belongs to him. Looking at the viewing platform that had gradually become slack, he knew that the smell of blood in this killing castle was also extremely dangerous. That kind of smell that can throw everyone into chaos will create this castle full of slaughter. I'll challenge you. Ran looked at the position on the stage that had begun to change. He stood opposite a man in black, and there was a trace of panic in his eyes. The slaughtering aura that swept in made Ran start to become irritable, especially standing on the challenge platform of the slaughter city. The place mixed with various smells made him a little flustered. I don't accept it because my challenge today is over. The man in black waved his hand and went down. Looking at the warm atmosphere around him, Ran seemed to sense the deep meaning in the other party's eyes. In the challenge arena, Ran has been regarded by everyone as a fledgling fool, and the rules here are decided after layers of screening. Naturally, after Ran stood up, some people in the stands have begun to move around, and such a challenge opportunity is likely to bet on their own chips. It was difficult to challenge one by one, causing Ran to stand in the ring, and everyone who had seen the turbulent eyes felt a burst of horror. The power that was devoured by the darkness returned to its original point. Ran had already won over 82 people. He was the challenger who stood on the ring for the longest time. Moreover, his combat effectiveness is also commendable among all the people, and soon the person in the high stands can no longer hold his breath. Advertisement. The red liquid swaying in his hand was instantly crushed by him, and the feeling of being outraged made him secretly look at the direction of Jing Ran standing on the ring. 343 inches go, you must give me a result today. Yes, master. Night is the master of the killing city, and he will never allow those who can break the rules to appear. The boundless anger completely swept over everyone in the slaughter city, but the boundless darkness was covered with red blood, and soon Ran had completed 90 challenges one after another. A cowardly servant knelt under the Dark Knight's feet, and her body trembled when she looked at the Dark Knight. Master, this person is a person who accidentally fell into the killing city, and can't find any information. When the servant finished talking tremblingly, her body was still shaking, and the fear from the bottom of her body had spread all over her body. Roll. Dark Knight hates this kind of power that is no longer among the masters, and the boy who suddenly appeared does not know that he has begun to be targeted. When the servant was about to leave, he had already turned into a lifeless doll in Dark Knight's hands. Like a marionette, it lost all its vitality. Ran looked up in the direction of the Dark Knight. This high position always made him feel a strange feeling. Being targeted, Ran felt that in the city of slaughter, there seemed to be rules but there were no rules. Chapter 277 Alliance Xuanyuan, Panic Premonition. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Ran has been standing on the challenge stage for a long time, and his body has been dyed red by that kind of blood. The originally bright red color had begun to turn into a dark red, dipping into his skin and turning into a sticky solid. Ran looked at the weapon that had been dyed red in his hand, and had no emotion at all. The face is lifeless, and all the people in the killing city are fighting for the same idea. In order to find a chance to survive, they become eager to kill, and even have the excitement that piles up in the continuous killing. At the same time that Dark Yi looked at Ran, he was also looking at another situation. A challenger of 98, and a challenger of 90, he began to look forward to what the two would encounter in the ring. The gloomy face gradually became a little angry, and the puppet-like maid began to announce that today's ring will be closed. Ran had already covered the look in his eyebrows, and he had already felt the discord in the killing city. Someone wants to stop their progress, and if another challenger reaches 99, then the two of them will have a fight. And in this case, it is killing city that will ultimately benefit. In the competition between Snipe and Clam, one side will inevitably lose, and under such an offensive, Ron feels that the alliance is always the best policy. But now he can't even protect himself, so how can he find another author to ask? Hello, I just watched your fight, we can choose an alliance. Advertisement. A man in black with a glass of wine walked in front of Ran, and there was no change in his mood at all, but he still had a hint of panic. Why did you choose me? The die was very different. He was found by someone as soon as he had a righteous thought in his heart. He didn't want to believe such a coincidence. Because it has to be you, and I've seen all your shows, you're very good, there's no doubt about that, and I'm also very good. The face of the man in black was completely hidden under the black smock, and there was nothing unusual at all. Ran did not speak, but stared into the eyes of the man in black. Those blue eyes permeated the vastness of the ocean, and he couldn't help but think of the water spirit beads. I promise you, but you want me to see your face. The other party obviously couldn't believe it. In the city of slaughter, there is no partner at all. As long as there is killing, there is nothing but killing. The man in black did not speak, but the movements in his hands explained a lot of things, and the man in black after placing the order was reflected in his red-stained pupils. This is the appearance of a thin teenager, but there is an extra scar on his face, which is indeed two different appearances from his body. Roughness and weakness do not seem to be his description, but there is a tenacious vitality in him. If the water is released at this moment, it means that all the previous ones will fail. I see. 3. I'm G Ran. Since we chose the alliance, we won't see each other in the final ring match. Advertisement. But Xuanyuan's mind had already begun to panic, and he could foresee that G Ran must be a figure standing at the top of the world, and these were things he would never be able to catch up with. He is the only rule in this killing city, but such a two-legged situation has not been seen for many years. With a secret sound, the sound of inserted flesh and blood entered my ears. There was a helpless voice floating in the wind, and Ran lost her voice when she watched Xuanyuan leave. Ran looked at this young man in amazement. He didn't seem to be afraid of the influence of the air on him at all. Originally, Ran was still in a state of distrust, but when he looked up, he saw the self who was hiding in the depths of his heart. I can't quit. Ran didn't speak, seemingly tacitly but seemed to be thinking about other issues. At least at his current stage, Xuanyuan was an opponent he had met enough to make him comment. I am Xuanyuan. Impossible, with the rigid hierarchy that exists here, to challenge we must choose a win-win situation, preferably a draw. 9. Soon the competition between the two top teams became anxious on the second day, and many people were more active in order to watch the excitement. Zhang Guan had already prepared the long sword in his hand, and the long sword still had the mark of dried blood hanging on it. At this time, we choose to trust each other to challenge the rules of the killing city, but at the same time we still have a chance of survival. Saji Ran, I really hope that both of us can be people who can go out. Okay, there are chronic poisons in this wine, you should drink less. Are you okay? Advertisement. Instead, he signaled Xuanyuan not to continue talking, but he was staring at the slight changes in the corner and began to speak differently. Ran looked down at a sound from the dark place, and the whole person suddenly stopped talking. Ran on the broadcasting station has already won the 99th round, and Xuanyuan is also the winner of the 99th round. The arena between the two of them has been in memory for many years, and the Dark Knight can't see the love in the eyes of the two of them. I didn't bring this. You have to believe me. When the two are on the stage with almost the same strength, you must decide the winner in the last battle, and the time is controlled within a stick of incense, once the time has passed. The red liquid swaying in his hand was dyed, but he was very clear that there was a slight addictive substance in it, and it became so indifferent when mixed in the blood. The weapon in Rand's hand was aimed at a corner in the darkness, and a force like a cloud penetrated the last line of his defense at dawn. He knew that from the time he entered the Slaughter City, he had been silently being watched. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. The backs of the two of them were stretched infinitely like this, and in Xuanyuan's eyes, they couldn't help but start to escape. I couldn't see the changes in the dark night, but it was clear that they really dragged on to the end this time. Xuanyuan was a very strong opponent. Rand did not change his mood later, but added a thought in his eyebrows and eyes. Both of them maintained a very fortunate consciousness. He was very worried that everything was just a pawn for the other party. PFF'd. Okay, good. Even in his memory it began to become blurred. The killing city only deserves the pleasure of endless darkness and killing. Looking at the voyeur who had fallen to the ground, there was no light in Rand's eyes at all. Rand has decided to go all out. After all, they all know the ruler who is creating this castle, and they are watching their every move in the dark. Chapter 278 Challenge the Road to Hell, Nine-Headed Snake for subscription. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Rand's whole body began to be invaded by a kind of dark power, and suddenly changed into another state in an instant. The bloody smell in the air continued to spread, and these smells continued to spread into the infected respiratory tract with the sound of the moving party. Originally able to maintain his own calm, his face quickly turned crimson, and even those eyes began to become bloodshot. The clear voice in the darkness began to continuously tempt Rand's spiritual power, constantly trying to break through Rand's last line of defense. Xuanyuan saw that the two of them were standing side by side, although they all knew in their hearts that the temporary alliance could bring more benefits in exchange. Because on the radio, they have to last until the end. Rand, how are you? After a while, Rand's heart began to gradually calm down, and the worm-like voice in his mind began to subside at this moment. But Rand clearly realized that as long as he didn't escape from the City of Hell, he couldn't figure it out completely. The absolute power contest in the 9th level turned into a killing, and the bloody scene was replayed over and over again in front of them. At 343 hours, Xuanyuan would raise his head and look in the direction of Rand, although only a stick of incense was left for them to procrastinate, and they would soon face the choice of the City Lord. Advertisement. For many years, this place was like an endless hell, and no one could escape, not to mention the two younger-looking teenagers in front of the City Lord. Therefore, when Dark Knight looked at them invisibly, he also clearly realized in his heart that no one would be an exception in this space. What's more, the rules here are all what he said, so everyone in their castle is staying to accompany him through the boundless darkness. Since you have made up your mind to escape, there are only two paths in front of you, one is to stay here, and the other is to go through hell. The Dark Knight looked at the movements of the two people indifferently, and the voice of the beloved was almost synchronized. The different eyes and the smashed wine glass in Dark Yi's hands seemed to silently tell the fate of the two of them who risked their lives to choose only destruction. Have you heard that the two of them refused Dark Knight's choice without hesitation? This hell road is simply a death sentence. How could the nine-headed snake wings, a species that have been eliminated in ancient times, hide in the bottom layer of the Slaughter City? But Rand gave up the invitation to stay here, and Dark Knight understood that even if he was forced to stay here, he couldn't change this person and he was not able to control it. Thank you for reading this story at mtlnation.com. Your support enables us to keep the site running. Xuanyuan himself also understands that they are working very hard to get out of here. It's all in vain to die. Rand, I admire you very much, so we walked together on this road and took care of each other. When Rand and Xuanyuan seemed to realize this point at the same time, their eyes collided in the air, and soon Rand took two bows and arrows from his space and handed them to Xuanyuan. Advertisement. The scalding heat waves came one after another, and Rand did not relax his vigilance, and vaguely felt a surging power from the magma. When this behemoth was shot out of two pairs of eyes, it became violent, and it began to dive into the magma to launch a fatal blow. Nine-headed snake-winged eyes are exposed to the air, and they are blinking constantly, observing the potential threats in the surrounding environment. It was too late for Rand to think, and the nine-headed snake wings began to attack, and its 9 heads left him nowhere to start. The kind of exciting scene appeared in front of them, and if they were not careful, they would fall into it and become ashes. Rand, I'll do it, your head is better than mine. With the restlessness in the air, Rankin gradually gave up the attack at a place in the distance, but chose to continue to wait and observe. All things are on the bright side. The two of them are very aware of Dark Knight's temper, so they set off as early as possible to avoid Dark Knight's regret. I heard that I have finally seen a little rush over the years, but I didn't expect it to end in such a tragic way. These two people really don't know how high the sky is. The unseen scorching heat instantly swept their senses, and looking at the scalding magma below, they knew that the road was not so simple. The two of them rhymed arrows at the same time, and the arrow feathers shot by the rhyme pierced into the eyes of 9 snake wings like shooting stars. Xuanyuan looked at Rand's complexion. Their goals were all first level, but he knew very well that Rand was definitely not a fish in a pond. The situation where Shiren became tense had already made Xuanyuan feel a little exhausted, and there was simply no time for them to start. Too rigid and easier to break ADBF, naturally clear die has chosen a path of life and death. Advertisement. In the dark night of the high-rise, the strong emotion he felt when he saw Ran suddenly couldn't be closed. This fluctuation made him uneasy, and soon a scorching fireball sprayed them, which confirmed the idea of dying. The scorching in the heat had begun to make Xuanyuan's mind unclear, and even began to become a little chaotic, but in order to escape, he had to forcibly suppress this sense of powerlessness. When he embarked on the road of killing, Ranji realized that this was actually a passage under the broadcasting station. It is clear that they have now begun to fall into a passive situation, and if they want to completely destroy the remaining 6 pairs of eyes, someone must act as a bait. Because the sensitivity of the 9-headed snake wings is no less than that of a 15th order powerhouse, not to mention that it also has wings to facilitate its simultaneous attack and defense. Along the way, Ran heard various voices of discussion, although he knew very well that this trip was likely to be miserable, but if he didn't break this rule, he would be here forever. The bubbling lava seems to be preparing to erupt from time to time. It was a force from darkness that would even sweep the order of them all, changing the rules of the city of hell. All his ambitions have yet to be fulfilled, and he is the one who never stops. Xuanyuan's jumping action had already begun to fall in Ran's eyes, and after making a sound, the 9-headed snake wings began to take off, and Ran had already found the time to instantly kill 2 pairs. Since the Dark Knight looked at the 2 of them, Ran had already looked very determined, not to mention that it is impossible for no one to feel fear in front of the Dark Knight. The 9-headed snake wings were smashed, and the 4 pairs of eyes were now close to the brink of rage, and began to breathe fire continuously towards this hell road, releasing its anger. In the firelight, the dyed whole face turned into a fire-breathing red, but their situation was not as simple as imagined. Chapter 279 Fierce Beheading, Clear the 9th Floor. Subscribe. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The situation that was out of control now began to get worse, and Xuanyuan began to worry when he saw the destroyed section of the road. In front of them, a third of the road has been destroyed. If you want to reach Jiko as soon as possible, you must first solve the trouble of Hydra Wing. Ran, let's try again. I just observed that this Hydra has 3 pairs of eyes that cannot be opened. It must be that the previous experience of killing has been destroyed, so we have another chance. Xuanyuan is very aware of the distance between the 2 of them now, and only if he is more suitable as the attacked party can stabilize the situation. Ran didn't answer, but looked at the already warm atmosphere in the air and nodded in agreement. You pay attention to safety. Yu Roran has already started to choose the location for the next shot. After 2 attempts, this behemoth is already familiar with their methods. If this time, the old tricks are repeated, presumably it will only be more ferocious in its aspirations. After all, 4 pairs of eyes have been destroyed, and the other 3 pairs have been destroyed by adventurers who are constantly breaking in. If they lose 2 pairs, they will completely fall into boundless darkness. The hot bubbles in the magma began to become abnormal, and the scorching atmosphere suddenly wrapped the 2 of them in the net. The 9-headed snake wing is simply a ferocious hunter, it has become extremely alert, and with his hearing, he has begun to identify the location of the 2 people's movement. Xuanyuan had already reached the edge of the cliff, and only at this position could he be able to attract the attention of the 9-headed snake wing. Advertisement. At this moment, the bow and arrow in Ran's hands were already tense, and the scalding heat continued to become warm, and the 9-headed snake wings finally appeared in Ran's range. The 9-headed snake wing has been keenly aware of the smell of gunpowder smoke being cut in the air, and it began to become abnormally irritable. Seeing Xuanyuan standing on the edge of the cliff being attacked, but at this moment, Ran started to insert 2 other arrow feathers before he could think about it. At this moment, the flames of the 9-headed snake wings have begun to lick the road they are on, and the front has been plunged into a sea of fire. The broken bridge deck also began to collapse gradually, almost a long distance from the opening of the cave. They can't escape at all, let alone in such an extreme position, they can only use the strength of each other if they want to escape. Then the other party is bound to be buried here, and the heat and cruelty instantly made Xuanyuan even less calm. At this moment, he just wanted to escape from this hell full of killing. Ran looked at the embarrassment of condensation in the air, he realized that in the face of absolute life and death, everyone began to make inquiries to choose, and he also wanted to know what choice Xuanyuan would have. The next moment he understood that Xuanyuan had to use his strength to escape from here, and he had to let a person be buried here. The flames were still burning, and the frequency of magma eruptions also began to increase. Soon in front of him, the light of Shinko couldn't be seen at all, and he couldn't even guarantee his next comfort. The 9-headed serpent wing has begun to be restless, the extent of its destruction has become larger and larger, and it has made Ran nowhere to go. Now there is only one situation on the face, the sharpness of the 9-headed snake wings has long made Ran start to fear, so the violent 9-headed snake wings must be killed at this moment. Advertisement. Ran's eyes couldn't see a trace of blood at all, but he looked forward calmly, and he chose to confront the 9-headed snake wings head on. The long knife that had been hooked in his hand was swallowed by the flames, and the scorching temperature instantly lit up a flame in his heart. Ran has begun to calm down in the direction that the 9-headed snake wings flew in the panic. The long knife licked the tongue of flame and became extremely hot, and when the 9-headed snake wings rushed towards him, Ran was already ready. This extinct ancient species existed in Dantian. Once this kind of dantian is formed, it can be dissected to greatly increase the strength of cultivators with the same attributes. It was obvious that Ran was ready to get this inner alchemy, and he aimed at the beating flames in Ran's eyes in the fiery magma, and his long knife pierced into the hard skin of the nine-headed snake wings. The scorching heat ignited everything, and the moment Needon was cut off, the nine-headed snake wings began to rush in and out. After Ran had collected the inner alchemy, he looked in the direction of the entrance of the cave. At this moment, the nine-headed snake wing had not cared about its inner alchemy, but was a boundless revenge. 0. Ask for flowers. The dying, which had already consumed a lot of physical strength, is now starting to become more exhausted. Nine-headed snakewing's hatred has been revealed, and if it knew that Ran had to use its last breath to escape from this place, it might be even more angry. The huge impact made Ran feel that there was a riot in the entire space, and the place that had collapsed was now destroyed. The flames licked the dyed clothes, and he was ready to jump at the mouth of the hook at any time. The erupted magma is constantly rising, and the abnormal rising height is approaching the distance of the dye hole. Advertisement. So he didn't have any extra time to think about the next move. He rhymed a hard rope in his hand, and with the swing of his body, he had already started heading towards the hole. Just in time for the last bit of magma to erupt, Ran began to control his body's impulse to the hole along the force of this collision. The sound of an explosion came from behind, and the nine-headed snake wings fell into the magma without a trace. Ran knew that the source of evil in the city of hell came from the arena, and there were species that should have been eliminated in ancient times under the broadcasting platform. He should know that the city of hell is not so simple. With the eruption of magma, presumably the owner of Slaughter City became uncontrollable this time. After the core area was destroyed, the secrets belonging to the city of hell were naturally destroyed along with the magma. Ran Yi walked easily and looked at the outside world, his mind was clear, and now the 9th level has been successfully completed. Group News. Ran has successfully completed the test of the 9th level of the virtual battlefield, officially upgraded and received rewards. Remaining time. 1 hour. Friends who don't complete the task will fall into the sinking of time again. A bright road begins to appear in the darkness, and Ran can feel the comfort from the natural force when walking on it. This gentle power allowed Ran to restore his wasted mental power, thus speeding up the energy conversion in his body. To be able to possess such heaven-defying power, only dying can do it. Ran is clearly aware that the road he wants to take in the future is likely to be full of thorns, but he will not take a step back. Chapter 280. The group announced the creation of the world. Xuanyuan begged for mercy. Subscription. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The expressions on everyone's faces gradually began to become joyful, and they were still very excited about the powerhouses who could last until the end. The group chat channel has begun to tout it gradually, and everyone sincerely congratulates the success of dying. Zhu and Xiaoxiao, really amazing, as expected of the person we selected. Whitebeard, the young man has always been in constant battles in the future, and the 9-layer virtual battlefield level is a great recognition for him. Open black lens bracket Yi Hei close black lens bracket. I have always admired only the strong. Open black lens bracket Song Kui close black lens bracket. Dying brother, it's really good, it's a pity that Selenum can only reach the 5th floor. Hongkui, if he is really strong, those of us like him can only watch him go away. Haihara I, only by completely defeating the opponent can we truly face everything. Everyone's 347 attention has been completely attracted to die and pass the test of the 9th level, and this perverted virtual battlefield has finally come to an end. Ran saw that his body strength had returned to its original state, and the strength after the surge of essence in the heaven and earth began to fill his body. Chosen in the dark, Ran begins to realize that all the power he has acquired in the virtual battlefield begins to leap. Group News. Victory in the virtual battlefield. Get the test of upgrading 1 level, and directly fill up with various skills. Advertisement. When Ran looked at the screen, he said in his heart that it was impossible not to be excited. All the skills that have been fully loaded have made him improve rapidly in the entire cultivation world. This kind of promotion was born after being put to death, so his power has indeed accumulated to the level where he can break through to the next level. The realm of the 13th order has already begun to fall on his halo, and the steady power has gradually become calm after it has begun to skyrocket. But at the same time, he has to go through experience and be able to inherit the mantle of the 13th rank, and experience the 3 tribulations of thunder, wind, and fire, and he will be promoted after the tribulation. Inside his body has begun to be restless, and it seems that the forces in the environment are also changing rapidly. Ran already felt that the power from the essence of heaven and earth was attracting him. When the thunder tribulation began, Ran's heart began to become a little lotus. Immediately after that, the tribulation of the wind came, and the pain of splitting swept through his 5 senses, making him feel the most real damage for a time. The fire robbery conforms to the essence of heaven and earth, covering him from head to toe, and the hot tongue of fire constantly burns the vastness of his body. When these 3 forces began to swim in Ran's body in sequence, Ran's calm appearance was now only struggling. Once the catastrophe falls, it will mean that Ran must bear heavy blows alone within 3 days. Ran, who experienced the beatings of thunder, wind, and fire, has become weak from the beginning, and has gradually become accommodating. His physique has determined his difference from the beginning. The 3 kinds of catastrophe have become more solid in the tempering, and his body and appearance have begun to mutate. After Ran's body had forcibly fought 3 calamities, the aura around his body began to become more intense, and the aura of spiritual power had begun to become pure. At this moment, Ran was aware of the change in his power, and he was very clear that he saw a more brilliant future in the 3 catastrophe. Advertisement. In that world, he got the most powerful symbol of power, and he must go all out to reach that height. In the beginning of the world, you were to be the leader of all. Only in this way, the only one who can stand at the top of the world. The mind keeps thinking, and the inner world of Dai becomes one after another. After the catastrophe, he was successfully promoted to the true immortal. The prophecy of creation has fully appeared, then the future world that belongs to him will eventually become a reality when he is promoted. When Ron began to realize that the power in his surroundings was weakening, a deeper meaning appeared on his face. Mingming can see the uncontrollable irritability, and gradually he began to recall some relevant content of the founding notice. Dying is ready to plan for the future. After all, the dying has completely changed after experiencing the virtual battlefield. He clearly realized that in this world, only master with absolute commanding power can go further and stand higher. At the beginning of the world, it was necessary to expand their personnel backup force. When Ran looked at the group chat message, he suddenly took the initiative to apply for a friend. Although he doesn't need anyone's support in his current state, he can't help but think about what kind of people will join. After clicking on the chat dialog box, there was a hint of sternness in the dyed eyebrows. His brows were furrowed, and it was more difficult to see his true thoughts clearly. Xuanyuan, I want to apologize to you about the road to hell. After all, I am sorry, and you will do whatever you say in the future. Advertisement. Ah, Ran looked at his sincere words, and could not help but be stained with a trace of elusive dissatisfaction. Being able to abandon the alliance partners at the juncture of life and death can already explain a lot of problems. Natural Dai is very clear that such people, their purpose of existence is only one by one profit. The mind that had already disappeared was gradually burned into a prairie by a fire, but now Ran has begun to plan every step he wants to take in the future. As if Xuanyuan didn't realize his real mistake at all, he still followed Ran's back. Ran has already begun to decide on the future cultivation method, and the strength of the 13th rank absolutely allows him to do many things. In this unexplored creation, he has unlimited opportunities to create his own kingdom. Ran, I think my attitude is enough to explain everything, but I am telling you clearly now that I will not become a partner with you. This is not at all sloppy, but it is like dying his character. Xuanyuan could only sigh when he saw this, and the flash of hope in his eyes was extinguished like this. Group News. At the beginning of the creation of the world, various forces have been forming non-stop. If you want to stay in this world, you must abide by the rules of this world and find leaders worthy of your trust. This is very important. When this news was hooked into the group chat, everyone began to become enthusiastic and boiling. They are all pondering the deep meaning of this group news, but some people quickly make a choice, because they know that there is a person worthy of entrustment.